Chapter 41. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased by 10. Current affection is at 80. System, the male lead is here. Wei Wei Bai's smile deepened, but because of the blood on her face, she looked even more sorrowful. Seeing her like this, Li Qingqing became even more vicious. She viciously whipped Wei Wei Bai again. Hurry up and tell me, you don't love Han Chengwu. Li Qingqing was already a pervert. She loved Han Chengwu to the point of being perverted. She hated all the women who tried to get close to Han Chengwu. She would not allow anyone to love Han Chengwu more than she did. Wei Wei Bai was covered in blood as she lay in the rain. Suddenly, a white light appeared in the sky, followed by the sound of thunder. The rain washed away the blood on Wei Wei Bai's face, but it brought with it a terrifying pale white. Her eyes were shockingly bright, causing Li Qingqing to tremble in fear. I love him, and that has never changed. This sentence shook everyone's heart. After Wei Wei Bai finished speaking, a mouthful of blood surged up and she directly coughed it out. System, warning, the host has overdrawn her life force. The effect of the life extension pill is beginning to weaken. Wei Wei Bai, don't be afraid, I'll take care of everything. After Wei Wei Bai comforted the system, she heard Li Qingqing's cold laugh. So what if you love him? He doesn't love you at all. You can just die under my whip like an ant. After saying this, the iron whip fiercely whipped towards Wei Wei Bai again. A figure quickly rushed over and grabbed the iron whip. Blood immediately seeped out from his hand. Wei Wei Bai looked at the man in front of her, and the system's notification sounded again. Ding, the male lead's affection is at 90. In the midst of the thunderstorm, Li Qingqing's mournful voice was especially piercing. Zhengyu, listen to me. How could Han Chengwu listen to this venomous woman? After he snatched the whip, he immediately whipped Li Qingqing to the ground. The moment he arrived, he saw Wei Wei Bai lying in a pool of blood. He was on the verge of collapsing. Wei Wei Bai said she loved him. Even when she was being tortured to death, she still said that she loved him. Clearly, as long as he said that he did not love her, he would not be whipped. After Han Chengwu knocked Li Qingqing to the ground, he turned around and hugged Wei Wei Bai in his arms. His hands were covered in blood, everywhere was covered in blood. He was trembling all over and his voice was hoarse. Wei Wei Bai looked at him deeply. She was so weak that she was about to disappear. She wanted to raise her hand, but she didn't have the strength. She forced out a smile. Even though it was covered in blood, it still carried an incomparable craftiness. Hey, Han Chengwu, aren't you afraid of thunder? Han Chengwu's face was incomparably pale, but he still forced a smile. For you, I'm not afraid. Compared to thunder, he was more afraid that something would happen to her. The system said, warning, there's a dangerous attack. Wei Wei Bai immediately said, change all of my remaining life extension pills to 10 minutes of mobility. The system said, you can only change it for 3 minutes. Wei Wei Bai said, okay. In the next moment, Wei Wei Bai felt that her body could move again. A huge force made her grab Han Chengwu's body and push him down hard. Then, she laid on top of him. Bang! It was the sound of thunder and a gunshot at the same time. A bullet instantly pierced through her back. Wei Wei. Han Chengwu's pupils immediately contracted. His heart was like an engine that had lost control, beating rapidly. It was so painful that it was about to spasm. Wei Wei Bai's eyes began to lose focus, but the smile on the corner of her mouth did not change. Do you know how many years I've loved you? I still remember that year when you entered the school, you wore a white shirt. The sun shone on your black hair, and your eyes were as clear as amber under the sun. At that time, I felt that my heart was beating, and then it disappeared. It was lost in your body. Chapter 42. Han Chengwu was frightened and at a loss. He reached out and desperately covered her wound. Don't say it, I'll take you to the hospital. You'll be fine. Wei Wei Bai still gently said, from now on, I'm no longer me. You can do whatever you want. If you feel bad, I'll cry with you. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 93. Wei Wei Bai said, I still remember that year when my father knew that I liked you and wanted to kill you. I lied that we were in love and that if you died, I wouldn't live. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 95. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were filled with deep affection. I threatened you to marry me because if you didn't marry me, my father would kill you. My parents are dead and you are free. From now on, I won't bother you anymore. Won't bother you anymore. Han Chengwu's heart was torn apart. He bit his lips so hard that it almost bled. No, I want you to bother me. You've been bothering me for so many years. You can't leave me when I fall in love with you. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 97. Wei Wei Bai smiled and her eyes seemed to be filled with stars. Blood fell from her lips and was washed away by the rain. She stretched out her hands with difficulty and weakly covered his ears. The continuation pill has 5 seconds left. Big brother, it's going to thunder. She softly said. The sound of thunder rang out. Han Chengwu forcefully grabbed her hand and said with a trembling voice, the doctor is coming, you hold on. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 100. Congratulations to the host, the mission has been completed. The continuation pill's effect is 0, the host is ready to leave this world. Wei Wei Bai felt a sharp pain attack her. After the continuation pill lost its effect, the pain came like a tide. Her smile almost fell and her face turned pale. She struggled to say the last sentence, I never regretted meeting you. As soon as she said this, her fingers lost strength. Han Chengwu felt that the whole world had quietened down. Obviously, he was most afraid of thunderstorms. But why couldn't he hear the thunder? She couldn't hear her heartbeat either. Wei Wei, don't scare me, Wei Wei, wake up. He hugged her in despair, but he didn't feel anything when the heavy rain hit his body. The bodyguards who followed them had already subdued Li Qingqing. Although the person who shot the gun had run away, there were still people who chased after him. The ambulance also came, but Han Chengwu refused to let anyone touch Wei Wei Bai. He was like a wild beast protecting its food, guarding Wei Wei Bai's body tightly. It was as if he could deceive himself that she was not dead, but just asleep. After Wei Wei Bai left her original body, she turned around and glanced at Han Chengwu. The despair on his face made everyone's hearts palpitate. The system reminded him, it's time to leave, host. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Let's go. Then, she felt a flash of white light, and the familiar voice of the system rang in her ears. Ding. The strategy is successful. You have received 1 love point. Please choose your wish. Wei Wei Bai immediately said, lifespan. Your lifespan is extended by 1 month. Do you want to wake up immediately? Wei Wei Bai said, yes. If she didn't go back quickly, she would be treated as a vegetable and the company would become Bai Yaoiro's. Although she had signed the inheritance transfer agreement, it wouldn't take effect immediately. She wanted her father's signature. Because Bai Yaoyaro didn't have the chance to delve too deeply into the company's affairs, she didn't know about this and chose to kill her. The and read the at https://www.soshu.com. The and read the full article at https://www.soshu.com and read the full article at https://www.soshu.com and read the full article at https://m.soshu.com at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 43. You can search Transmigration System, idle, come to Soshu.com on Baidu to find the. She had only fainted for 3 days, so she should still have a chance to stop Bai Yaoyaro from coaxing her father to sign the transfer agreement. Ding. Your wish has been fulfilled. After hearing that, Wei Wei Bai was suddenly pulled into a deep darkness. She vaguely heard the sound of people walking around. She opened her eyes with much effort and realized that she was lying in a hospital. Beside her, there seemed to be a nurse and a doctor talking. The Bai family has been in trouble recently. Problems keep appearing in the heads one after another. That's right. It seems like only the second miss is left. When I was in the intensive care unit, I heard that the chairman of the Bai family wanted to sign the transfer agreement and let the second miss take over the company. When Wei Wei Bai heard that, She immediately sat up in shock. A familiar dull pain came from her chest. Although she was alive, the heart problem was still there. When she woke up, the doctors and nurses in the ward were overjoyed. "Miss Bai, you're awake. That's great. Miss Bai, where are you going?" Wei Bai couldn't hear those words. She pulled the needle in her hand and rushed out. She knew that the Bai family was in the intensive care unit in the hospital. She wore a hospital gown, her face was pale, and her hair was messy like a bird's nest as she ran around the hospital. A few men seemed to be blocking her way, but she didn't even look at them. She ordered coldly, "Move aside." A hint of surprise flashed across the eyes of the man standing at the front, but it quickly disappeared without a trace. They moved aside. When Wei Bai disappeared at the end of the corridor, a man behind said respectfully to the man standing at the front, "Young Master Yi?" Yi Yuxuan turned around as if nothing had happened. "Let's go." It was as if he didn't even see his fiancée running past him in such a sorry state. When Wei Bai saw the intensive care unit, she immediately pushed the door open and entered. Then, she heard Bai Yaro say softly, "Father, are you tired? Leave the company to me." Bai Changyang laid on the hospital bed, looking weak. He passed a document to Bai Yaro and said, "I've already signed it. Since your elder sister wants to give up her position to you, you should do your best." Bai Yaro was elated. "Father, I will do my best on behalf of elder sister." Wei Bai coldly said, "I'm not dead yet. I don't need you to replace me." Bai Changyang and Bai Yaro were both shocked. Bai Changyan's face was filled with excitement. "Wei, you've recovered." Bai Yaro panicked. "Elder sister." Wei Bai rushed over and slapped her in the face. "Who's your sister?" After speaking, Wei Bai snatched the document from her hands and tore it into pieces, scattering the shards all over Bai Yaroiro's head. Bai Yaro covered her face and immediately said, "Elder sister, I." Wei Bai slapped her again, causing Bai Yaro to shriek in pain and fall to the ground. Wei Bai squatted down and grabbed her clothes. Her face was cold and stern. Just as she was about to expose her crime, she felt a familiar pain in her chest. She was stunned. Didn't she have a month to live? Why did it feel like it was going to be over at any moment? The system suddenly said, "Host, I forgot to tell you. I took your love points and put them on credit. You lost 1 month of your lifespan." Wei Bai felt a sweetness in her throat and decided to ignore the system. She glared at Bai Yaro and spat, "You." "Ooh." A mouthful of blood sprayed onto Bai Yaroiro's face. Bai Yaro was in pain and fear. Her face was covered in blood, and she couldn't help but scream, "Help. Crossover system, Adonis. Come here." Crossover system, Adonis, come here. / crossover system, Adonis, come here. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click save at the bottom to record this reading. Crossover system, Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 44. Wei Bai fell on Bai Yaroiro's body, causing her to stick out her tongue. Bai Changyang immediately rang the bell and shouted anxiously, "Doctor, my daughter's acting up." The nurses and doctors who were already on standby immediately rushed in to rescue and maintain the scene. Before Wei Bai fainted, she heard the system's notification. The host's life is on the brink of collapse. Please complete the next mission quickly to save your life. Wei Bai almost wanted to pinch the system and ask, "Am I going to die soon?" The system chuckled. "There's no choice. There's only one love point, and it's gone if you exchange it for a continuation pill. I gave you 3 days of sleep. It's free, so you don't have to return it." Wei Bai really wanted to curse. It turned out that her newbie gift pack was free. Why was this broken system so stingy? After Wei Bai fainted, the doctors carried her to the emergency room. Even though Bai Changyan's body was weak, he forced himself to get up and follow the doctors to the operating room. Bai Yaroiro's heart was palpitating. She didn't expect her dying sister to wake up. A hint of viciousness flashed across her eyes. It seemed like she couldn't let Wei Bai live anymore. Seeing Bai Changyan's sad face, she immediately changed her mood and said pitifully, "Father, nothing will happen to elder sister." It was a pity that her face was covered in blood. Because of the beating, her face was swollen like a pig's head. She didn't look pitiful, but she looked very funny. Bai Changyang thought about how his daughter hated Bai Yarrow to the core when she woke up. He also thought about how Bai Yarrow was the only one present when his daughter fainted. Bai Changyan's eyes turned cold. Bai Yarrow continued gently, "Elder sister might have acted up, and her mind wasn't clear. When she woke up, her personality changed drastically. She hit and scolded me. I'm not afraid of pain. As long as elder sister can wake up, I'll do anything." Bai Changyang knew that it was a little too presumptuous to suspect Bai Yarrow like this. Moreover, Wei Bai had always liked this second daughter of his. Although he had doubts in his heart, Bai Changyang still decided to wait until Wei Bai woke up. Bai Yarrow suddenly said, "Father, elder sister tore the contract. Why don't I make a copy and sign it again?" Without Wei Bai's signature, Bai Changyan's signature would do as well. Bai Changyang didn't agree immediately because he had doubts in his heart. "Let's talk about it later. Your sister is still in critical condition." Bai Yarrow knew that Bai Changyang was suspicious. She pursed her lips without batting an eyelid. Her eyes were filled with malice, but she still replied gently, "Okay, elder sister is the most important. Uncle Qin, I think I have feelings for her." This sentence made Qin Qiu, the director of the hospital, shocked. Even the coffee cup in his hand fell to the ground. He looked up and saw the man sitting in front of him. His entire body exuded an aura of indifference and calmness. On his impeccably handsome face, there was no expression. His eyes were so still that they were close to death. It was as if nothing in this world could enter his eyes. This man was the pride of the Yi family, Yi Yuxuan. However, the man who single-handedly supported the Yi family had a strange illness. He couldn't feel the emotions of others. He was just like a machine. He was so cold that it made people shudder. When others cried, he would watch them cry. When others laughed, he would watch them laugh too. He was just like a deity without any feelings, looking down at everyone from high above. This kind of Yi Yuxuan was their pride, but at the same time, he was a bomb that made people fear and respect him at the same time. Download the at https://m-soshu.com. Chapter 45. You have feelings. What kind of feelings? Qin Qiu asked with trepidation. Yi Yuxuan coldly tilted her head and thought for a moment, then coldly replied, "I cried." Qin Qiu was stunned. His lips trembled for several seconds before he said, You cried." The last sentence, he almost roared out. In this world, Qin Qiu would not be surprised if anyone cried. But if Yi Yuxuan cried, he would wonder if it was the end of the world. Yi Yuxuan closed her eyes, looking a little tired. "I had a dream, a very, very long dream." Qin Qiu was still shocked. What dream is so powerful? One had to know that Yi Yuxuan didn't have any feelings. Not to mention crying, even if all the people around this man died, he wouldn't even frown. Yi Yuxuan opened her eyes. In the dead pupils, there was finally a trace of emotional fluctuation. It was a dream about love. CEO Brother Love Me Again follow-up. The rain in a thunderstorm is always particularly cold. In the grey weather, Han Chengwu watched Wei Bai being buried with his own eyes. He pursed his lips. His body rapidly lost weight in a short period of time. When he saw the urn being buried, he suddenly rushed over and grabbed it. "Mr. Han?" everyone exclaimed, but they still could not stop the man in front of them. Because his eyes were so desperate that people could not help but feel pity. Wei said that she did not like cemeteries, she wanted to go to a place full of flowers, she was afraid of being alone. "I have to accompany her." Han Chengwu held the urn tightly, his pale face sticking to the cold urn, as if this was his only salvation. He thought that he could bear the pain of losing her. After she died, he seemed to feel no pain at all, according to all the steps in an orderly manner. He didn't expect that Wei Bai had her phone with her and that she was recording. Her confrontation with Li Qingqing before her death had been recorded. "Yes, I did it, But no one will know about this. When he heard Li Qingqing's roar, his entire body turned cold from head to toe. He remembered how Wei Weibai tried her best to explain to him after she regained her memory that the car accident was a setup. However, he didn't believe it and let the real culprit get away with it, causing her to be killed. Unprecedented regret and pain were like termites, biting his heart until it was full of holes. I love him. These words carried a heart-wrenching sound as he coughed up blood. He was clearly in so much pain, but he still managed to say it word by word. When Han Chengwu heard this, he felt as if the entire world had turned silent and dark. Then came the intense pain that tore his entire body apart. The tears in his eyes finally fell. Drop by drop, line by line, they surged out. Regret, pain, longing, and despair intertwined into an unbearable burden that completely bent him. Wei Wei, Wei Wei, Wei Wei, I love you too, Qin Qiu. Ah, so you cried too. A trace of fatigue could be seen on Yi Yuxuan's silent face. He nodded. When I woke up, my face was full of tears. Qin Qiu, then you also felt heartache? Yi Yuxuan was silent for a long time, so long that Qin Qiu was nervous. Then he shook his head. I don't know. Chapter 46. What kind of answer is this? For Yi Yuxuan, there is no such thing as ambiguous words. Yes is yes, no is no. What the hell is not clear? Qin Qiu cautiously asked, is there a follow-up to that dream? Yi Yuxuan nodded. The man in the dream took the urn away. He investigated the traitor around him who helped Li Qingqing commit the crime. It was his right-hand man. Qin Qiu coughed. What a detailed dream. The traitor didn't want to kill him, and then take the opportunity to rise. Yi Yuxuan shook his head and denied. The traitor said he liked Li Qingqing, so he wanted to help Li Qingqing realize her wish and help her become Mrs. Han. Qin Qiu couldn't believe it. Someone likes this kind of woman? Although Yi Yuxuan didn't have any expression, he still nodded in agreement. Later, he gave up everything, took the urn, found the most beautiful sea of flowers in the world, and scattered the ashes in the sea of flowers. Yi Yuxuan reached out and rubbed his temples. He was dreaming all night, and what was even more terrible was that he felt that the desperate man was him. After I woke up, I felt my chest was tight, and I couldn't control my tears, so I came to the hospital. Qin Qiu poured another cup of coffee. He had to drink something to calm down. After all, this was the first time Yi Yuxuan cried since he was born. When he heard Yi Yuxuan's words, he couldn't help but ask, why did you come to the hospital? You're starting to have feelings. This is a good thing. Yi Yuxuan touched his chest. My chest was tight, and last night when I slept, I couldn't stop crying. Qin Qiu still didn't understand. And then? What did this have to do with coming to the hospital? Yi Yuxuan frowned again. A rare expression appeared on his face. And I forgot the name of the woman in the dream, and her face. Qin Qiu nodded. It's a dream. You can't remember everything. Yi Yuxuan glanced at him faintly. That's why I came to the hospital for a checkup. The focus is on my heart, eyes, and brain. I might have been too tired recently, which caused my chest to feel stuffy and short of breath. I might have overused my eyes and started to show symptoms of myopia, which is why I started to cry. Also, excessive fatigue might also cause amnesia. Pu. Qin Qiu spat out a mouthful of coffee. What the fuck is this? After talking for so long, Yi Yuxuan still didn't understand what was wrong with her. She actually came here to ask for a checkup. He quickly put down the cup in his hand so as not to break another one. Then he leaned closer to Yi Yuxuan and said seriously, this has nothing to do with your body. It has to do with your heart. Yi Yuxuan looked at him coldly. So I have to do a heart test. Qin Qiu felt like he was talking to an alien. He anxiously said in a loud voice, no, I mean you feel heartache. This heartache is not physical, but your feelings have fluctuated. You have feelings. Yi Yuxuan seriously pondered, that is to say, there is no problem with my body. Qin Qiu felt that he finally understood. Nonsense, of course there is no problem. Yi Yuxuan nodded and then immediately stood up. Since there is no problem, I will go to work. With that, she did not hesitate to go out. Qin Qiu was left standing alone in the same place, stunned. So why did Yi Yuxuan come to the hospital? To tell him that he had a dream. Download collection below to record the reading record. Chapter 47. After Yi Yuxuan went out, he suddenly thought of something and called his old housekeeper. Shovel all the lawn in my front yard, and then plant all of them into flowers, the kind that connects into the sea. After the phone call, he realized that something was wrong with him. The lawn was obviously clean and easy to take care of, so why would he plant flowers? After thinking for a while, he didn't understand, so he decided to throw it to the back of his mind and work. Wei Bai felt a familiar headache. She knew that it was the necessary process of the memory passed into the brain. Without waiting for her to finish digesting it, a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. Niang, this slave accidentally poured cold water on Bai Yingyu. Please forgive me. The weather is hot, pouring cold water on Bai Yingyu's head will make her cool down, so that she won't think of something insubstantial all day long. Come, this one is tired, go back. The Niang smiled coldly and slowly sat on the sedan chair, as if Wei Bai was just a small insect in her eyes, not worth looking at. The slave next to her immediately nodded, set off the sedan chair. Niang is returning to the palace. Wei Bai was still kneeling, so she reacted. Is this task to fight for favor in the harem? Just as she thought about it, the system's voice sounded. This task is to win the love of Sheng Xiyu. Goal, Sheng Xiyu. Occupation, Emperor. Completion, 0. The host has accepted the memory of this body, please work hard to capture it. She glanced at the memory sent by the system and only felt that she had transmigrated into such a thing. This time, she didn't have any family feud with the male lead. But she couldn't stop the previous Wei Bai from having a brain problem. Her family was not good, but because there was a stupid father in the family who desperately wanted to be a big official, the whole family used all means to send Wei Bai to the palace. But this Wei Bai may have inherited a problem with IQ, so her brain was not good. Most of the harem girls of the same year, because of their family background, appearance, or their own unique skills, have been promoted. This Wei Bai entered the palace for 3 months, but she didn't even see the face of the emperor. When she was anxious, she used all kinds of bad tricks. When she heard that the emperor was going to hold a banquet, she dressed up beautifully and applied rouge to rush to the banquet. In the end, the emperor didn't even look at her and directly threw her into the lotus pond in the imperial garden. Your brain is not good, go into the pool to clear your head. This was what the emperor said, emperor's words. Although she broke the banquet at night, the emperor didn't lower her rank. Because she was a commoner 9th rank, she was already the lowest rank of concubine. Any lower and she would be a palace maid. In the end, the emperor only ordered him to be grounded for a month. Of course, everyone knew that this Bai Yichen was useless. And in the palace, where the strong stepped on the weak, the original host was thoroughly stepped on from time, When she transmigrated, the original owner of this body was seen by a passing consort. She was punished by the other party to kneel for 4 hours and was even given a basin of cold water. It was March, the time when the peach blossoms just bloomed. The temperature was so cold that it made people shiver. This basin of cold water could probably take away half of her life. Wei Bai said, 4-4, do you have a grudge against me? Why are all the transmigrators stupider than the other? The system said, I'm trying my best to make you feel better. Look, you're not cold. I helped you block the pain, so you can't even feel the cold. Wei Bai's mood improved, you're so nice. But just as she finished speaking, her whole body shivered. A bone-piercing cold rushed from the soles of her feet to the top of her head. She almost fainted. The system said casually, Aya, the block is not working. Keep it up, host. Download // to make it easier for you to read next time. You can click save at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 48. Good luck, my ass. Wei Bai wished she could strangle this unreliable system to death. After 4 hours, Wei Bai couldn't even stand up. In fact, she was very impressed that she didn't faint. Master. A weak call came from the side. This voice scared Wei Wei Bai. She quickly turned around and found that there was another person kneeling behind her. Who is this? She searched through the system's memories and found that it was her palace maid. She was the last one to agree, and as usual, she was assigned 2 palace maids and 2 eunuchs. One of the palace maids was called Lu Lei and the other was called Hong Xiu. The palace maid who was kneeling behind her was called Hong Xiu. She was as timid as a mouse, but she was loyal. Hong Xiu was also kneeling, but her physical condition was much better than Wei Wei Bai. She immediately rushed over to support Wei Wei Bai. Let's go. Wei Wei Bai didn't have the energy to think about anything else. She felt that she was about to freeze to death. When they returned to Qingyuan Pavilion, Lu Lei had already prepared hot water and ginger soup. She quickly wiped Wei Wei Bai, who was about to faint, and put on new clothes. After Lu Lei wrapped a blanket around her and stuffed a heater into her hands, she even fed her some steaming ginger soup. Wei Wei Bai finally came back to life. Lu Lei and Hong Xiu were assigned to Qingyuan Pavilion by the palace. Originally, Wei Wei Bai, who had a very low status, couldn't occupy a courtyard. When the young mistresses were assigned to the 6 palaces, Wei Wei Bai was supposed to squeeze in with others in the back of the main palace. However, something big happened at that time. The mistress who lived in Qingyuan Pavilion actually hung herself from the beam. It was said that this place had been haunted for a long time and that 3 concubines had already been hanged. It was extremely unlucky. Who in the palace didn't fear this? Originally, it was going to be sealed, but because there were too many beauties and the Clear Source Pavilion's location was not bad, it was redistributed. No one was willing to live here. Everyone had some tricks up their sleeves. In the end, only Wei Wei Bai, who had a screw loose in her head, was assigned to live here. It turned out that there was another harem who wanted to live with them. However, when that harem heard that it was such an unlucky place, she directly jumped into a well to commit suicide. She was rescued and hung up for a few days before she died. From then on, the Clear Source Pavilion made people avoid it even more. When Wei Wei Bai saw these memories, she felt that the original owner was really lucky that she hadn't been pressed to death in the well despite being so stupid. Although they were living in a haunted house, Wei Wei Bai felt that living alone was better than squeezing in with others. She glanced at the 2 palace maids in front of her and suddenly realized where the 2 eunuchs had gone. Wei Wei Bai asked calmly, "Where are Xiao Shazi and Xiao Zhuazi?" Hong Xiu replied in a low voice, "Master, Xiao Shazi went to the Shong Food Bureau to get dinner. Xiao Zhuazi was just transferred away." When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she knew that Xiao Zhuazi must have seen how useless and brainless she was and knew that she had no future, so he directly ran away. If he left, then so be it. How can a master like me, who has no future, keep people? If any of you want to leave, you can leave now. When LV Lei and Hong Xiu heard this, their expressions changed greatly. They immediately knelt down and kowtowed to Wei Wei Bai. "Master, this servant would never dare to be disloyal. Please judge clearly." Xiao Shazi, who had just brought in dinner, immediately put the food aside and knelt down at the door when she heard Wei Wei Bai's words. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyelids and said in an imposing manner, "That's good. They are all loyal servants. Let's get along well in the future." Button the Chapter 49. A few people breathed a sigh of relief, but they felt that Wei Wei Bai was a little different today. The meal was very ordinary, and at first glance, it was a perfunctory meal. Wei Wei Bai was not picky, she ate and went to sleep. She continued to restore her strength and communicated with the system as usual before going to bed. "How long can I live this time?" The system thought for a moment and replied, "This time flow rate is 3 months. Similarly, the life of a person in a vegetative state for 3 days was actually 3 months here. It was good news, she didn't have to rush like in the last world. Wei Wei Bai said, "What about Sheng Xiu's information?" The system seemed to search for it. "It's just general information, not everything. After all, you were a novice in the last world, so I gave you a discount and let you know more about the target." After that, the system transmitted Sheng Xiu's basic information. After Wei Wei Bai finished reading, Her body trembled. Obviously, she was nestled in the quilt, but she still felt cold. This Shang Siyu was a ruthless character. It was said that this person was not qualified to sit on the throne. He was the child of a palace girl and was rejected by the previous emperor since childhood. To get rid of the fate of being abandoned, Shang Siyu entered the military camp from a young age. In the military camp, he killed a bloody path and became a leader who was feared by everyone. Later, the palace was fierce. The crown prince and the second prince joined forces to force the emperor to abdicate. Shang Siyu, in the name of cleaning up the emperor, directly led 100,000 troops into the palace. He said that he was going to save people, but in the end, the crown prince died, the second prince died, and the previous emperor also died. Shang Siyu said that he didn't go in time, and those who died together. Then he ascended the throne and became the emperor. If he said that he didn't kill them, who would believe it? But Shang Siyu's style was iron-blooded, and his means were exceedingly good. He governed the country in an orderly manner, and no one dared to say anything. Wei Bai summed it up: this time, the target is not to be trifled with. In the last world, Han Chengwu at least had compassion. In this world, this Shang Siyu was completely the role of meeting gods and killing gods. This kind of man had a hard heart and was a scumbag. He was the most difficult kind of man to win over. The system said coldly, "Do your best, do your best." Wei Bai's mouth twitched. Wait, didn't I get a reward for completing a side mission in the previous world? Where's the reward? The system was silent for a while. Oh, I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Let me flip through it. Can you be more reliable? You even want to flip the rewards. Did you dig it out from the garbage? The system said, "Found it, please accept." Ding. Reward of unrivaled beauty. Acceptance complete. A stunning face. A stunning face. Wei Bai immediately perked up and got off the bed to look for the bronze mirror. What the fuck? A stunning face. Which woman wouldn't be excited? She had never seen a truly stunning face in her life, so how could she not be excited? When he looked into the mirror, he saw a white, green, red, and purple yaksha face. Wei Bai was so scared that she dropped the bronze mirror in her hand and couldn't help but shout, "Ghost!" Was this really a peerless beauty? This was definitely a peerless face. Anyone who saw this would probably want to end their lives and hang themselves on the roof beams. The system couldn't help but pinch its ears. "Can you wash your face?" Wei Bai said, "Washing my face isn't the main point. The main point is, why did the previous owner's face paint like this?" The system flipped through something again. Oh, the information was too miscellaneous. I forgot to send it to you. It seems that the previous owner thought that it looked the best when she painted it like this, so her makeup has always been this strange. To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click the button. Chapter 50. Wei Bai gritted her teeth. What a godlike aesthetic. No wonder Shang Siyu threw me into the pool as soon as he saw me. This also explained why the original owner of this body hadn't been tortured to death. Anyone who saw this face would only be laughing. Who would want to torture her to death? This won't do. I have to think of a way to let my stunning face amaze the world. Wei Bai said while rubbing her face with cold water. System. I have never seen such a shameless person like the host. It was the imperial concubine's birthday, so all the concubines had to be present. Wei Bai looked at her stunning face and was silent for a long time. The system was a little worried. Host, what's wrong with you? Are you dead? Wei Bai finally answered with a sad face, I'm dead, I'm so beautiful. System, by Wei. In this world, there is actually such a clear-headed and refined face, such a gorgeous face. System, Wei Bai suddenly burst into tears. What should I do? The system was frightened. Host, what's wrong with you? Bai Wei slowly covered her face, self-pitying and lamenting. I am beautiful to this extent. I will definitely cause chaos in the imperial court, leading to a war that will destroy the country. In the end, all countries will compete with each other for me, resulting in the Third World War. I'm simply a sinner. My beautiful face will destroy the world. The system finally couldn't help it. Oh, Wei Wei Bai suddenly sat up straight and her face returned to its usual indifference. Well, it's time to do business. The system still felt that this Wei Wei Bai was normal. The one just now was simply possessed by a narcissist. Then the system watched as Wei Wei Bai began to mix colors, desperately smearing red, orange, green, and blue on her face. A ferocious and terrifying yakshaw face that was red, green, and purple appeared once again. The system trembled. Host, are you crazy with your beauty? Why are you wasting your face like this? Although a peerless appearance wasn't worth much in the rewards, it shouldn't be trampled on like this. Wei Wei Bai smiled coldly. Do you think that this old lady can get a man's heart with a stunning face? You are too naive. What kind of person is Sheng Xiyu? He had rolled over a pile of corpses. Would he be moved by beauty? Such a man is not a fatuous ruler. I've been pretending to be ugly for so long. If I suddenly recover my looks, he'll be suspicious and think that I'm a spy. He'll probably kill me directly. The system nodded. Your analysis makes sense. Wei Wei Bai stood up and walked out. All right, let's go attend that little bitch consort Chen's birthday. I want to give her a big surprise. System, little bitch. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head, followed by Lu Lei and Hong Xiu, and arrived at Consort Chen's palace. Because Consort Chen's garden had just been bestowed with orchids by the emperor, the concubines were led to admire the flowers. Oh, isn't that the ugly actress? One of the concubines saw Wei Wei Bai and couldn't help but sneer. Wei Wei Bai pretended not to hear the ridicule of others and bowed her head to greet Consort Chen. Consort Chen looked at her with disgust. When she thought of having to see Wei Wei Bai's ugly face on her birthday, she felt uncomfortable. What are you doing here? Aren't you still under house arrest? Wei Wei Bai answered somewhat woodenly. Consort Chen Yang, this concubine's 1-month house arrest has already passed. Consort Chen waved her hand in annoyance. Someone come. Bai Ying spoke rudely and contradicted this consort. Punish her to enter the water to calm down for 3 hours. Read the full text //. Download the full text. Read the full text. To facilitate your next reading, you can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 51. Ever since the emperor ordered people to throw Wei Wei Bai into the pond, many people punished Wei Wei Bai by throwing her into the water. Yes, Your Highness. Several eunuchs immediately rushed over to grab Wei Wei Bai and threw her into the lotus pond. When Wei Wei Bai entered the water, she heard a familiar reminder. Ding, the male lead is here. Wei Wei Bai pretended not to understand water. She struggled in the water for a few seconds before reaching out to grab a lotus and poking her head out. She lightly coughed a few times. In front of her was a circle of women and standing in the middle was a man wearing a bright yellow robe. It was clear that he was her target. Her coughing seemed to attract the attention of those people. The consort Chen's voice rang out, Emperor, little sister Bai's personality is too naughty and her face is too ugly. This consort was afraid that she would scare people, so she punished her by standing in the pond. The man was indifferent. His eyes were incomparably deep and dark, as if any light that entered would be completely destroyed. He lazily turned his head and swept his eyes over the pond as if he didn't care at all. Then he was completely stunned. The woman standing in the pond, it was more appropriate to call her a young girl. She slightly tilted her head and looked at him with a pair of clear eyes that were like the stars in the night sky. Her lips were red without any lipstick and her skin was white like a pear. Her beautiful face had a trace of naivety and her thick and smooth hair was already disheveled, but it gave off a feeling that made people's hearts palpitate. The pond water soaked her light green clothes, tightly sticking to her petite and beautiful body. She seemed to be a little panicked, but also a little curious as she secretly looked at him. With this look, the corners of her eyes slightly tilted and a faint pink color appeared. It was so beautiful that it was like the entire peach blossom forest had bloomed early, creating a dazzling scene. The man felt his heart being hit. It didn't hurt, but it itched. He frowned and immediately looked away, as if he couldn't bear Wei Wei Bai's gaze. Ding, the male lead's favorable impression has increased to 10. Wei Wei Bai did not react. She just wanted to show her face openly. Therefore, The colors that she applied to her face were all plant colors, which would fall off upon contact with water. Previously, the original owner of the body was an idiot, afraid that her scary makeup would fall off, so she used colors that would not fade when exposed to water, causing her to wash her face for a long time. She should show her face now. She didn't want to increase her favorability. Just like that, he came knocking on his door. The system said coldly, "What happened to rolling in a pile of corpses and not being moved by beauty?" Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. "Department, don't you think Sheng Xiu's eyesight is too good? It has to be above 50, question mark. Wei Wei Bai, I can't see his face clearly from where I am standing. How did he see me? That's too far." Just as the system was about to reply, Wei Wei Bai sighed softly, "Indeed, my beautiful face is like the sun, able to illuminate the entire world. At the same time, it also illuminates the black eyes of others, allowing them to see my incomparably beautiful appearance from afar." The system felt that it was going to die soon. Shameless was already unable to describe this host. It had no words. Sheng Xiu, who was far away, took a group of harem women and left in a grandiose manner. Just when Wei Wei Bai thought that the 10 points of favorability were fake, the emperor's eunuch came over and sent her back to Qingyuan Pavilion. After returning, Wei Wei Bai had just finished washing herself when she received the news that she was going to serve the emperor tonight. After sending away the eunuch who came to inform her, Bai Weiwei immediately ran in front of the bronze mirror and smeared green and purple paint on her face. It was an eyesore. Button the Chapter 52. The system couldn't bear to look at her. "Can't you not wear makeup?" Wei Wei Bai coldly snorted, "I can only wear makeup when the time is right. Do you think I like this yakshaw face?" Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's movements paused. "System, do you think I need XXOO to serve him in bed?" "System, isn't that nonsense? Do you think Sheng Xiu is just chatting with you under the quilt?" Wei Wei Bai bit her lip and was speechless for a long time. She suddenly washed her face and took out the original paint that couldn't be washed off with water. "System, what are you doing, host? This is very difficult to wash off." Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and angrily said, "I don't want to serve him in bed. I want to scare Sheng Xiu into impotence. This is my first night, and I want to give it to a strange man. System, it doesn't matter who you give it to, just think of it as a sacrifice for favorability." Wei Wei Bai fiercely painted her face. "I don't want to, I want to keep it for myself. I am so beautiful, I can't bear to give it to others." System, oh my god, this host is really crazy. In the evening, the aunts and eunuchs in the palace who came to serve saw Wei Wei Bai's terrible face and collectively raised their eyebrows. Did this host want to scare people to death in the middle of the night? It was estimated that she didn't need to do anything else. Just standing outside and there would be demons and ghosts, scaring many palace maids and eunuchs to death. But the emperor wanted people to serve him in bed. It was estimated that he wanted to change his taste. Although this taste was a bit heavy, the eunuch Suda lit up the lamp. Then he turned around and respectfully said, "The emperor, it's time to rest." Sheng Xiu put down the pen in his hand and elegantly got up. "Then let's go." Suda was stunned. In the past, he had to be urged 3 times, but today it seemed like he couldn't wait. He remembered that the emperor asked him faintly during the day, "Who is the person in the pool?" Suda was the chief eunuch in the palace. He was in charge of everything, so of course he knew who it was. After he answered, he heard the emperor's cold voice saying, "Tonight, we'll flip her sign." The emperor always flipped the cards according to the order. He flipped 1 card a day and did not favor anyone. However, when she thought about how Wei Wei Bai had accidentally exposed her face, she felt that men always like to try new things, so it was just a moment of interest. When they arrived at the door of the palace, Sheng Xiu let everyone retreat and went in alone. The light in the bedroom was very bright, enough to see Wei Wei Bai sitting on the bed clearly. When Sheng Xiu saw her face, his footsteps paused. He suddenly turned around and pulled out a sword hanging on the wall. The sword flashed and slashed towards Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai was still communicating with the system. This emperor had a handsome face, long legs, and black hair. It was obvious that he had good kidneys. Although he wasn't as good-looking as her, he was still considered a handsome man. She would just have to make do with her first night. But just as they finished talking, a sword slashed down. Wei Wei Bai's scalp exploded. Her whole body rolled directly and awkwardly drilled under the bed. Fuck, you dead system. Is this the favorability of 10? This is -10. System, there is no mistake, it is 10. Outside the bed, Sheng Xiu's voice was cold and gloomy. Where did this monster come from? She dares to come here and be presumptuous. Monster Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while, then weakly said, Emperor, this concubine promised in vain. Sheng Xiu, ding, the male lead's favorability has decreased by 8, remaining 2. When Wei Wei Bai heard the system's voice, she couldn't help but grind her teeth. Damn you, Sheng Xiu, she was wrong about him. She thought that this guy would not be moved by beauty. As a result, when she didn't have a face, his favorability dropped faster than anyone else's. Teether. Chapter 53. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, come to Soshu. Com in Baidu to find the. Sheng Xiu coldly said, Come out, what a scandal. Wei Wei Bai burst into tears. Was she willing to do this? Sheng Xiu held the sword and waited for a while before he heard Wei Wei Bai's voice trembling as she asked, Then the Emperor. Will the Emperor not cut off the concubine? Sheng Xiu frowned, thinking of Wei Wei Bai's face just now. The hand holding the sword tightened a bit. He reluctantly said, I know you are a human, so I won't cut you. The system laughed twice. You said that as if you weren't a human. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to pack Sheng Xiu and the system together and flush them down the toilet. Sheng Xiu waited for a while and saw a petite person slowly crawling out from under the bed. She looked up and secretly glanced at him. Her eyes were like a pool of water under the light, but they disappeared in a flash under her drooping eyelids. Wei Wei Bai was just about to salute him, but Sheng Xiu had already looked at her face with disgust, and then put the sword back. Someone come, wash Bai Ying's face. Under his order, Wei Wei Bai suffered a calamity. The aunt who came in was like an enemy of her face, fiercely washing her makeup with water and oil. She also changed her clothes. It was a loose and beautiful gauze dress, and the gauze dress was decorated with hand-embroidered peach blossoms. When everyone was done, they retreated. Sheng Xiu, who was sitting on the side drinking tea, casually looked up and was stunned. Under the light of the lamp, the girl sitting on the bed placed her snow-white hands on her knees in an orderly manner. She slightly turned her face, her cheeks were flushed, and her skin was white like jade. Without that terrible makeup covering her face, this beautiful face could simply cause an impact on anyone. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 10. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. Continuously increasing the favorability, Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but complain to the system, I didn't expect Sheng Xiu to be such a frivolous man. Seeing such a good face, the favorability of this person shot up like a rocket. The system was just about to say a few words of comfort. She then heard Wei Wei Bai say, But I like his frivolity. Do you think that if I let him lick my face, his favorability towards me will rise to 100? The system wished it could strangle Wei Wei Bai to death. You dream faster. Don't chat with me if you don't have anything to do. I'm busy. After the system finished speaking, it immediately blocked Wei Wei Bai. It was definitely the first system in history to block its host. It had no choice, it was forced to do so. Knowing that the system had left because of her nagging, Wei Wei Bai felt a little melancholy. It was so lonely without the system to tease her. She raised her head and secretly glanced at Sheng Xiu, only to be met with a pair of eyes as black as the abyss. His eyes were so cold that no matter how beautiful they were, they couldn't warm him up. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and nervously looked down at her feet again. Sheng Xiu suddenly said, Are you afraid of me? Wei Wei Bai trembled and carefully replied, This concubine is not afraid. Sheng Xiu also saw her exposed feet. Under the gauze, half of her smooth and delicate calves were exposed, and her white toes were gently curled up. He felt that his throat was a little dry and couldn't help but drink a few more mouthfuls of tea. Why do you dress yourself up so strangely? Wei Wei Bai seemed to remember something and stretched out her hands to cover her face in horror. Please don't look at this concubine's face. This concubine is ugly. Sheng Xiu looked at her face that was enough to cause the downfall of a country and felt that his temples couldn't stop throbbing. If this was considered ugly, then there was no such thing as a beautiful person in this world. The download address is at https://www.soshu.com tether. Chapter 54. That's ugly. Don't tell me that you're beautiful just now. Sheng Xiu rarely thought of teasing people. Wei Wei Bai was silent. Sheng Xiu was also silent. After a long time, he asked, "You don't really think that's beautiful, do you?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him with trepidation. Her fingers that were as white as cream uneasily grabbed her sleeves. She seemed to want to answer that it wasn't beautiful, but her eyes turned and she told the truth. This concubine thinks that it's beautiful. Because this concubine was ugly since childhood, it took me a lot of effort to learn this top-notch face-changing technique to cover this concubine's unsightly appearance. Sheng Xiu finally understood that there was indeed a strange disease in this world that could see the beautiful as ugly, and the ugly as beautiful. And Wei Wei Bai should have this strange disease. He was suddenly a little curious. Then in your eyes, am I ugly or beautiful? Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned and secretly looked at Sheng Xiu. These few eyes looked delicate and innocent, which made his eyes darken a lot. After she finished looking, she immediately bowed her head, but her fingers lost their color because she grabbed her sleeves too hard. Sheng Xiu took another sip of tea, only to find that the teacup had long been empty. He had never talked to a woman like this before. But surprisingly, he didn't dislike it at all. Wei Wei Bai said cautiously, "The emperor is tall and mighty. You are a man among men. Your appearance can't limit your majesty at all." Sheng Xiu said faintly, "So you're saying that I'm ugly?" Sheng Xiu's hand that put down the teacup paused, and the expression on his face almost collapsed. She didn't dislike, he looked ugly. When Wei Wei Bai saw him like this, she stammered, "You're not ugly, you just look more different, unique." Sheng Xiu, Wei Wei Bai still wanted to comfort him, but Sheng Xiu was afraid that he would be angered to death. He immediately got up and picked up a cup of tea. "My beloved concubine has said so much. You should be thirsty. Drink some tea." He must have found her too talkative and stuffed her mouth with tea. Wei Wei Bai drank her tea absent-mindedly, thinking that she was going to sleep with this strange man later. "I can't help but knock on the system. 4. Do you have any stand-in services? Can I pay on credit? That's half a love heart at most." The system was as silent as a chicken. "Wei Wei Bai, which one? Any more and I'll be dead. Please make an exception for me." "Wei Wei Bai, department 440. All of them. Fuck you." Sheng Xiu saw Bai Wei Wei drink the tea, and suddenly pushed his hand, directly pressing her onto the bed. "My dear concubine, the bed is warm at night, and the moon is shining outside the window. The weather is just right for us to sleep together." This beast, if he wanted to sleep with her, just say it directly. Why did he have to be so polite? Sheng Xiu took off his clothes, and his eyes were frighteningly deep. However, Wei Wei Bai was confused. She was shocked that something was wrong with her. Her head was dizzy, and she suddenly remembered the cup of tea just now. When Wei Wei Bai fainted, her face began to redden, and the half-naked Sheng Xiu got out of bed. After waiting for a while, he saw Wei Wei Bai moaning. Her clothes were already in a mess, and the scorching heat coming from her body made her sweat. A thin layer of sweat soaked her muslin clothes, and her exquisite jade body gave off a delicate and alluring allure under the candlelight. Sheng Xiu felt that his chest and abdomen were burning, and he almost couldn't hold it in. "The Emperor?" Wei Wei Bai seemed to look at him for help, and her eyes began to slacken. Sheng Xiu took 2 steps forward, but in the next second, he turned around. His face was gloomy and terrible. His hand had already touched the sword just now, and he pulled it out. Tea. Chapter 55. When Wei Wei Bai was carried back to Qingyuan Pavilion, she was completely dumbfounded. Who was she? Where was she going? Where should she go? She felt that she had spent the whole night with Sheng Xiu, but when she thought about it carefully, it hurt. She couldn't think of any details at all. Hong Xiu, Lu Lei, and Xiao Xiazi all kneeled on the ground, happy that their master was favored. On the other hand, Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the bed, was knocking on the system. System, what happened last night? Wei Wei Bai threatened, if you don't respond to me, I'll jump into the water and commit suicide. The system laughed coldly. Jump, jump. I've tolerated you for a long time. Can you stop calling me 04440? Wei Wei Bai, then what should we call it? Baby. The system shuddered and said angrily, call me your grandfather. Wei Wei Bai immediately sucked up to him and said, damn you. The system was speechless. It felt like something was wrong. Although the system had been arguing with Wei Wei Bai, it still did what it was supposed to do. It played the video that it had recorded last night and sent it directly to Wei Wei Bai. Sheng Xiu pulled out his sword, the cold light flashed, and the coldness on his face was clearly visible. As for Wei Wei Bai, she was still gasping for breath. She seemed to be unable to bear something as she clutched onto the brocade quilt. Her voice was soft and sorrowful as she called out, Emperor, this concubine feels very uncomfortable. Sheng Xiu turned his head and saw the girl on the bed with bright red lips. Her eyes were full of charm, and her body was open without any defense, as if she was tempting him. She was in a trance, but her broken moans made Sheng Xiu feel as if he had been electrocuted, and half of his body went numb. Sheng Xiu took a few deep breaths and found that he still couldn't calm down. Bai Weiwei once again called out in a low voice that made people's hearts tremble. He turned around and began to wield his sword fiercely. Weiwei Bai didn't seem to feel anything. Her face was full of confusion. She took off her clothes, and in the dark bedding, she was so sweet that he couldn't help himself. And every time Sheng Xiu saw this, he would use more force to wield his sword. Wherever the sword light flashed, tables, chairs, stools, and cabinets were all destroyed. One of them was charming and romantic, seductively rolling around on the bed while hugging the quilt. One of them had a gloomy and ruthless expression as he brandished the sword in his hand. The beauty of this scene could almost be considered a work of art. At this point in the video, Weiwei Bai was silent for a while before she said awkwardly, "Did I sleep with the sheets last night?" The system was silent for a while. "If you think so, then so be it." Weiwei Bai rubbed her face and felt that her head was about to explode. What's going on? Sheng Xiu let his concubine drink the medicine and let her go to bed alone, then what about him? Just a sword dance. This was the first time that Weiwei Bai felt that this world was so strange, and so unreasonable. The system said, "There is still a video, do you want to watch it?" Weiwei Bai struggled for a while, but still endured the danger of embarrassment and clicked yes. After Sheng Xiu finished his sword dance, he gasped fiercely and sweated all over. His face was full of anger and his face was flushed. Weiwei Bai on the bed was also quiet, the drug had passed. Sheng Xiu carried his sword and walked to the bed with a cold face. He saw Weiwei Bai lying in the middle of the quilt, her soft body was slightly trembling, and her face was half turned. Even after such a lewd dream, there was still no trace of filth. Antitha. Chapter 56. He looked at her and didn't know why he thought of the peach blossoms, the color when they were half blooming. It was so beautiful that it seemed so unreal. As if it would disappear at any time. Sheng Xiu looked at her blushing little face. He didn't know why, but as if he was bewitched, he bent down and gently kissed her lips. A sweet smell came, and Sheng Xiu was stiff, like a young boy who had never seen a woman before. He didn't know how to deal with this feeling. He tried to stick out the tip of his tongue and pried open her unguarded lips, but he didn't wait to go inside. The voice of the head eunuch came from outside, "Your Majesty, it's dawn." Sheng Xiu's movements paused, and he left Weiwei Bai with some embarrassment. Then he turned around and didn't dare to look at her. His breath was in a mess. He stabilized his breath and coldly said, I know, let someone serve me. After that, the sword in his hand slipped from his fingers, and a few drops of blood fell on the quilt, acting as Wei Wei Bai's first night. When he heard the sound of the palace servants coming in to serve, he almost reflexively pulled the bed curtain and covered Wei Wei Bai's naked body. After waiting for the palace maids and eunuchs to take care of everything, Sheng Xiu's expression was obscure as he looked at the well-dressed Bai Weiwei sleeping on the bed. After everyone retreated, the head eunuch came over. Sheng Xiu seemed to have made a decision and said to his most trusted eunuch, "Her." The head eunuch bowed, and a trace of surprise flashed on his face. "Your Majesty, are you sure?" Sheng Xiu closed his eyes tiredly. "Her, I need a reason to become an incapable ruler, so that I can make a move against the four great families." The four great families were the families of the ministers who controlled the domestic politics. It was no secret that the dynasty was controlled by the ministers, and it wasn't a matter of 1 or 2 years, but several generations. This led to the emperor and the four great families fighting each other for hundreds of years, and as a result, the emperor's rights were getting less and less. When Sheng Xiu was on the throne, he didn't rely on the power of the four great families. The most powerful woman in the harem, Consort Chen, was the only daughter of the leader of the four great families, the Su family. If it wasn't for the fact that Consort Chen was still childless, she would have already become the empress. Sheng Xiu knew that if he wanted to fight with a powerful minister, he could win, but it would take decades. By that time, his country would be almost destroyed. It would be better to take a different approach and directly exterminate them. However, the reputation of the four great clans in the country was not bad. If there was no reason to confiscate their property, it would cause a commotion. Therefore, he had to set up a target so that everyone's hatred would be focused on another person. After killing the four great clans and then killing that target, they would be able to vent the anger of the commoners. What kind of target could affect an emperor? Of course, it was the demoness who brought disaster to the country, who charmed the emperor until he completely lost his soul. Sheng Xiu's eyes darkened as he looked at the sleeping Wei Wei Bai. He suppressed the uncomfortable feeling in his heart and said very firmly, "She is beautiful enough, stupid enough. If we use her well, she is a very good chess piece." Suda pondered for a moment before replying respectfully, "Your Majesty is wise. This is indeed the best method. But Bai Ying has no reason to target the four great clans, this." Sheng Xiu impatiently interrupted him, "Then create one. Consort Chen will definitely be dissatisfied with her. She used to be dissatisfied with the concubines with bad family backgrounds and would frame other people's families. We will just stand by and wait for the results." Record. Chapter 57. The head eunuch bowed his head, "Yes." Sheng Xiu got up and picked up the sword, "Let her have a higher starting point and give her the title of Jiao Yi. I'm going to do my morning exercise." The head eunuch glanced around. Although the things destroyed by the sword last night had been replaced with new ones, it could still be seen that Sheng Xiu's heart was not calm. Sheng Xiu would only use the sword when his heart was disturbed. After watching the video, Wei Wei Bai, system, after being silent for a while, Wei Wei Bai dragged the quilt and wrapped herself up like a dumpling. It was terrible. She was going to become a demoness who would bring disaster to the country. She was just joking, but the result was that she was really forced to do something beyond her ability. The system comforted her, "Don't be sad, it's just a bad reputation. After being dismembered by 5 horses, you will be spat on for thousands of years." Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't help but look up and swallow the sad tears. "Damn, I thought I met an easy target, but the result is not as good as the last one. Spicy chicken system, you change the target for me. I don't want to be killed after being used by Sheng Xiu." Sheng Xiu's intention was to use her hand to destroy the 4 great families. Then, when the 4 great clans were finished, he would kill her to vent the anger of the commoners. The system had some rare sympathy. "Actually, if you succeed, he won't kill you, probably." Bai Weiwei whimpered as she hugged the pillow. She fiercely scolded the system, "You're a broken system, a spicy chicken idiot waste with no merit. Under other people's systems, you can enter the ground, fly, and even drive a spaceship to set off fireworks. Each one of them is a considerate little cotton-padded jacket with a cheat. You, on the other hand, can't do anything. Even if I change the target, you're still making excuses. What can I expect from you? The system didn't dare to say anything. Wei Wei Bai began to twist the sheets. The system was shocked. What are you doing? Wei Wei Bai, I'm going to hang myself, so as not to bring disaster to the country. System, after venting, Wei Wei Bai finally remembered what she had to do. That's not right. Why did Sheng Siyu give me drugged tea and deliberately let me think that we were in bed? Wei Wei Bai's expression turned serious. It seems that none of the women in the harem are pregnant. Perhaps they are still virgins like me. The system was puzzled as well. That's right. They're all their own women, yet they're not eating them. Even if they don't want the women of the 4 great clans to get pregnant, they should have plenty of contraceptive methods. Wei Wei Bai pondered for a while before slowly spitting out the truth. I think I understand now. Sheng Siyu is impotent. The system also felt that it was possible. Just as it was about to agree, Wei Wei Bai had already taken out a bronze mirror from the side and looked at her own face. I'm so beautiful that I can cause the downfall of a country and its people. Even if I were to lie on the bed naked, he would still rather practice swordsmanship. He's either impotent or gay. The system looked at Wei Wei Bai's intoxicated look in the mirror and couldn't help but buy more than a dozen liters of eye drops to wash its eyes. Wei Wei Bai had just finished feeling sorry for herself when the decree of conferment came. From Bai Ying to Bai Jiao Yi. She directly flew from the 9th grade to the 3rd grade. This speed of promotion was simply like adding a helix gun, which was amazing. Then there were all kinds of treasures and jade as a reward. At the same time, there were also several servants. One of them was the first aunt, who had the authority to manage all the palace maids. When she came, she brought Sheng Siyu's verbal instructions. Bai Jiao Yi was not allowed to apply those colorful powders, so as not to hurt her skin. Wei Wei Bai faced this and finally had a headache. She reached out and touched her forehead. Oh no, Sheng Siyu is serious. Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text. Teether. Chapter 58. A man who used her as a target, who was impotent and ferocious. It was much more difficult to successfully capture him than to capture a man who had a grudge against her. Sure enough, at night, she flipped through her card again. Wei Wei Bai took a bath, her face was clean, and there was no smell of cosmetics. The clothes she wore were also chosen by herself. She was petite, wearing a soft green silk dress. She looked like a weak willow in the wind, as fresh as a crisp leaf in spring. She looked at Sheng Siyu's palace and coldly snorted, even if he is gay, this old lady can straighten him up. Daring to make her a target, she would be sorry for herself if she didn't torture him to death. Sheng Siyu was in the palace early. When he saw Wei Wei Bai coming in to salute, his eyes moved, and he immediately stood up and intimately supported her. My beloved concubine, why salute? What if you hurt your knees? Bai Wei Wei's goosebumps rose. A man with a paralyzed face, whispering such mushy words in a soft voice. So scary. Sheng Siyu held Wei Wei Bai's hand. The delicate and boneless touch made him couldn't help but use force. So soft. Is this a woman's hand? Sheng Siyu sighed in his heart, and then quietly led her to his table. Is this a painting painted by the emperor? Wei Wei Bai looked at the imposing landscape painting in front of her. There was a tiger on it. Landscape, tiger. The meaning of this painting, wasn't it to get rid of the tiger? Of course, Wei Wei Bai couldn't say that. She looked amazed and said, the emperor's painting is really beautiful. How is it beautiful? Sheng Siyu asked with a smile. Wei Wei Bai frowned in distress. This concubine has been very knowledgeable about painting since she was a child. The emperor is making things difficult for this concubine. Sheng Siyu couldn't help but smile, a sincere smile. This Wei Wei Bai, how could she be different from any other woman he met? Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 20. Bai Wei Wei heard this familiar voice and breathed a sigh of relief. She made the right bet. For a man like Sheng Siyu, a woman who can break his inner barriers must be a woman who can make him relax. As long as she was silly, he would feel comfortable. Once he felt comfortable, he would have a good impression of her. Although beauty could make a man yearn for a moment, after looking at a person's appearance for a long time, anyone would get tired of it. Shang Xiu held her hand. My beloved concubine, are you tired? Let's rest. Wei Wei Bai shyly lowered her head. Her face was flushed red, and she looked as beautiful as a flower. Shang Xiu's heart was in a mess, but he quickly pressed down his restless heart and led her to the bed. Then, he picked up the tea beside him and said, My dear concubine, have some tea. Wei Wei Bai shook her head. Can this concubine make a presumptuous request? Shang Xiu sneered coldly in his heart. Sure enough, all women were insatiably greedy. Just a little favor and they dared to ask for more. Emperor, please sit down. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and nervously twisted her fingers as she spoke in a soft voice. Shang Xiu smiled coldly and then sat beside her. He wanted to see what excessive request she would make. Quietly, Bai Weiwei grabbed a corner of his clothes. Then, she secretly glanced at him and found that Shang Xiu did not respond. She immediately showed a bright and silly smile. Then she tied the corner of her shirt to the corner of his shirt. A small and cute knot appeared. Shang Xiu waited for a long time, but Wei Wei Bai didn't ask for anything. What does my beloved concubine want? You can ask for anything. Wei Wei Bai shyly turned her head. Emperor, this concubine has already gotten what she wants. Shang Xiu was speechless as he looked at the knot between them. She wants this. What is this for? Wei Wei Bai softly said, This is what my mother told me. She said that when a couple gets married, they will tie this knot. In this way, the couple will be happy for a lifetime and will be together forever. Shang Xiu was stunned, and his heart was in chaos. But he didn't want to use the sword at all. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 25. Download the at https://m/soshu. Compt. Chapter 59. How could a secular couple get along with each other the same as an emperor's concubine? Just thinking about it was a rebellious thing. Shang Xiu wanted to say something, but looking at Wei Wei Bai's timid and implicitly admiring eyes, he suddenly couldn't bear to attack her. When he picked up the teacup, his fingers trembled a little. When he killed someone for the first time, his hands didn't tremble. Today, under Wei Wei Bai's admiring eyes, he couldn't even hold the teacup steadily. Wei Wei Bai obediently drank it and began to feel dizzy. Shang Xiu whispered, My dear concubine, it's time to rest. Wei Wei Bai nodded foolishly. Her cheeks were flushed, and her mind began to be unclear. She was prepared this time, knowing that once the drug took effect, she would lose her mind, and her hands and feet would be soft. But there was still some mobility. Before she completely lost her mind, she suddenly boldly reached out and hugged Shang Xiu. Her arm was like a jade lotus root, obviously soft and boneless, but it made Shang Xiu stiff and he didn't know how to break free. He eagerly looked at the sword hanging on the wall and wanted to grab the sword to resist the gentle strength of her arm. But in the next moment, Wei Wei Bai squeezed herself into his strong and broad chest and tried to rub against him like a kitten. Shang Xiu's breathing was heavy. None of the women in the harem could get close to him. When he faced the concubines who flipped their plates, he just gave them tea. Even if it was the imperial concubine who was more difficult to deal with, he would use tea with a bit of incense to deal with her. He grew up in the military camp since childhood. The military brothel was a place he couldn't go. The army was full of men, and he had never been in contact with women. Back then, he had rashly led an army to save his mother. But it was too late. His mother, who was regarded as a disgrace by the late emperor, was bullied by the people in the palace. Unexpectedly, when the crown prince was forcing the emperor to abdicate. She was killed by the empress at that time, the empress dowager who was now under house arrest. Human swine. Her limbs were cut off, her eyes were dug out, her ears were pierced, her tongue and nose were cut off and put in a jar. As soon as he arrived, he saw his mother dying under such torture. If it wasn't for the 4 great clans stopping him, he would have cut that bitch who killed his mother into 1,000 pieces on the spot. At that time, He swore in his heart that he would eradicate the Empress Dowager and the 4 great clans. When he saw the women in the harem, he was reminded of the times when he was bullied by the harem when he was young. He was well aware of how vicious the women in the palace were. When he touched them, it was just a simple handshake. He didn't feel their softness, but he thought of his mother's rotten body. He was so disgusted that he couldn't eat for 3 days. If it wasn't for Suda's strange hallucinogenic medicine, he wouldn't know how to deal with those venomous women. As for Wei Wei Bai, she was probably the first woman he had ever met that he didn't dislike. Sheng Xiu's body was as hard as a stone. He should have pushed away the presumptuous Wei Wei Bai, but his body defied the instructions of his brain and refused to get up. Her soft body was like warm water, and the temperature was rising into flames. Her delicate fingers, like willow branches, went deep into his clothes without any offensive power. Everywhere she touched, it ignited his passion that had never been awakened. He could hardly breathe. Every time he breathed, it was the faint fragrance of her body, which was different from the fragrance of spices. "Emperor, this concubine is uncomfortable." Wei Wei Bai hugged him and rubbed against him as she begged in a low voice. Record. Chapter 60. He was also uncomfortable. Extremely uncomfortable, unbearable. Sheng Xiu suddenly clasped her face, bowed his head and kissed her on the lips. Wei Wei Bai vaguely whispered a few words, but all her breath was swallowed up by him. At first, he was curious and carefully licked her lips, as if he was tasting something delicious and gently nibbling. Wei Wei Bai felt that it was difficult to breathe and tried to escape, but this aroused the fierce side of Sheng Xiu's character. He was no longer careful, but forcefully broke into her lips, overbearingly forcing her tongue to dance with him. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 30. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were blurred, she couldn't hear the system's reminder, she could only helplessly let him do whatever he wanted. She felt that she was floating, her lips were being attacked and gnawed by a beast. When she remembered to breathe through her nose, her neck was powerless and her eyes couldn't help but droop. When Sheng Xiu realized that something was wrong, Wei Wei Bai had already fainted. He was startled, and the hot feeling in his body cooled down. He hugged the woman lying softly on his chest, completely unable to calm his chaotic breathing. Sheng Xiu reached out and touched her pulse on the back of her neck. He knew that it was because he was too unrestrained and didn't know how to control himself, which made her short breaths and pause before she fainted. Although he knew that there was no problem, Sheng Xiu still couldn't control his panic. He called the head eunuch over and asked him to call the imperial doctor. The head eunuch saw that Bai Jiaoyi was tightly wrapped in a quilt, even her face was not exposed, and the wrinkles on his old face twitched. This person shouldn't have fainted because the quilt was too tight, she didn't even have room to breathe, right? After the imperial doctor came over, he also checked her pulse with a red thread through the curtain. Of course, it wasn't a big deal, she just fainted for a while. She just needed to sleep until she woke up naturally. Sheng Xiu didn't feel anything, but the head eunuch next to him saw it clearly. His master had walked out of a cruel environment where he had nothing at all. He had never received anything good since he was young. And once they got it, their possessiveness would explode. It was as if they were afraid that others would snatch it away from them. They would keep a close eye on the person, not even willing to let others take a look at a single strand of hair. Suda's heart was faintly uneasy, although he knew that Sheng Xiu had always been rational and indifferent. But this Bai Jiaoyi may very well become a special master. Wei Wei Bai had been promoted to Jiao Yi in one night, and she had served him in bed for 2 days in a row. Furthermore, the emperor had made an exception in the middle of the night to summon an imperial physician. This had stirred up 1,000 waves in the harem. When the imperial consort heard this, the teacup in her hand was heavily placed on the table. She coldly snorted, "She's just a foxy woman. It's understandable that the emperor wants something fresh for a while." She never thought that she would make such a big mistake by throwing Wei Wei Bai into the water on her birthday. She should have known that Wei Wei Bai was so pretty. I shouldn't have let her see the emperor. I should have destroyed her before she even showed her face. The imperial consort's eyes were vicious. She coldly ordered, "Tell this to my father. My father loves me the most." If he knows, Wei Wei Bai won't be able to recover. When Wei Wei Bai was confused and moved to another place to live, she realized that she had become the center of gossip. Sheng Xiu disliked Qing Yuan Pavilion, so he immediately changed it to a big and good place with a large peach forest. The gossipy system excitedly said, "Did you know? In the beginning, it was widely spread in the palace that Sheng Xiu, this guy, was invincible. He did it 18 times in one night, making you hover between life and death. You could only call for an imperial physician. Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text." Chapter 61. The gossipy system continued. Do you know? In the palace, there was a rumor that Sheng Xiu is as powerful as a beast. He did it 32 times in one night, making you wish you were dead. The gossipy system continued. Do you know? In the palace, there is a rumor that Sheng Xiu is worse than a beast. He did it 101 times in one night. Not only did he make you die, but he also let the imperial doctor apply preservatives on you. Wei Wei Bai glared at the system fiercely. Do you know? The first system in history to be dismembered by the host will be born in the next second. The system laughed twice and immediately said, "Isn't the favorability going up? I'm happy for you." This dead pig is not afraid of boiling water made her powerless, and then she began to let the system replay last night's video. After watching the video, she was silent for a long time. So, what 101 times? In fact, it was just a kiss. And this kiss only increased the favorability by 5 points. Wei Wei Bai counted the time and felt that with this slow speed, it was estimated that 3 months would be up, and she would not be able to make Sheng Xiu's favorability rise to 50. While thinking, she drew absent-mindedly. When she realized that there was someone next to her, she looked back and immediately saluted, "Emperor." Sheng Xiu glanced at her lips. There were still traces of him biting her lips last night after he had acted rashly. He suppressed the restlessness in his heart and glanced at the picture she drew. My beloved concubine's painting is also strange." Sheng Xiu looked at the yellow, unknown object in the painting. He really couldn't say any words of praise. When Wei Wei Bai heard it, she immediately picked up the paper happily. Is what the emperor said true? This concubine has been drawing all morning. This tiger looks good. Although it is not as powerful as the emperor's, it is also a rare masterpiece of this concubine. Tiger. Sheng Xiu reluctantly praised, "You draw very well, there is a lot of room for improvement." Wei Wei Bai saw that Sheng Xiu's words were insincere, and the joy in her eyes dimmed. This concubine knows that she has no talent, but she still wants to follow the emperor. Did she start learning to draw because of him? Sheng Xiu's heart softened. Which woman in the harem simply wanted to learn something for him? It was all for power and wealth. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 32. Her favorability increased by 2. Such a stingy and shabby favorability made Wei Wei Bai really want to slap Sheng Xiu, this stingy man. The system held back for a long time, and finally couldn't help but say, "You're obviously drawing Pikachu." Wei Wei Bai replied calmly, "Yeah, what do you want? I'm just that innocent, pure, and childlike. I just like Pokemon. Why don't you come and scold me?" System, the host is so self-righteous, yet you don't even dare to retort. What should I do? Wei Wei Bai finished painting. When she was washing her hands, she ordered someone to send some flower food over. Today was the flower festival. It was a festival unique to this dynasty. It was said that it was the most beautiful day of the year, so it was celebrated as a festival. Flower food was food made from flowers. LV Lei and Hong Xiu served up a bowl of fresh flower porridge, which was especially delicious. Sheng Xiu was very cautious about food. He almost didn't eat the food handed over by other concubines. But when he saw that it was Wei Wei Bai who handed it over, he didn't have any precautions and accompanied her to eat a bowl. Wei Wei Bai saw that he ate and was very happy. She said, "It's great. When I was at home, my mother and father would always eat flower food on the day of the flower festival. At night, they would go to see the lanterns, and then make a flower wish. My mother said that she and my father met at the flower festival." Button. Chapter 62. The Flower Fairy Festival had another function, which was that men and women could go out to play on this day. Naturally, after a long time, it would become a blind date. Bai Weiwei's tone carried the affection of a child towards her parents, as well as her love for the Flower Fairy Festival. Sheng Xiu's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. He knew that the Chen Fei should have felt his cold attitude and knew that she would start to deal with Weiwei Bai's parents. As for him, he could only watch from the sidelines and even allow those things to happen. He didn't dare to imagine what Weiwei Bai's expression would be when she knew that something had happened to her parents. Sheng Xiu suddenly found himself weak and didn't dare to imagine the future between him and her. When he came out of Weiwei Bai's place, the head eunuch whispered, "When the lanterns start to be lit tonight, the Chen family will hold a large-scale lantern appreciation party next to the canal, and most of them will use royal lanterns." Royal lanterns were the lanterns that only the royal family was qualified to enjoy. The Chen family was one of the 4 major families, and their power was the weakest, but they dared to challenge the royal authority. Sheng Xiu's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he said to the head eunuch, "Then starting tonight, raise the butcher's knife." Weiwei Bai thought that she could only attack until here today. In the evening, she had nothing to do, so she started to do needlework. After all, she was dressed as an ancient person, so she had to pretend a little. Weiwei Bai was embroidering halfway when Hong Xiu came in to cut the candles to make the lights brighter. "Master, it's late, embroidery is not good for the eyes." Weiwei Bai bowed her head and smiled softly, "It's okay, I just want to embroider a sachet for the emperor." She just said it casually. In fact, she only knew how to do cross-stitch, and her embroidery was not very good. "The male lead is here, just outside the window, he flew here, he flew here. Qinggong. Damn, I'm so excited, there's actually Qinggong." Weiwei Bai calmly continued to embroider her flowers. As expected, Hong Xiu continued, "Mistress, what are you embroidering? This is very peculiar." Weiwei Bai smiled shyly. "Today is the Flower Fairy Festival. What I embroidered is a mythical beast that protects the Flower Fairy Festival. It protects love." When Hong Xiu heard this, how could she not understand her thoughts? However, the emperor was heartless. How could Weiwei Bai's love be reciprocated? Furthermore, this divine beast was a little too ugly. The system tried its best to hold back, but in the end, it couldn't hold it in anymore. "You embroidered. This blue head, white face, and fingerless hands, isn't that Doraemon?" Furthermore, it was so ugly that it was about to go blind. Weiwei Bai smiled coldly. "You're so childish. You've watched all kinds of cartoons." The system almost choked. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 35. Sheng Xiu, who was secretly coming in from outside, did not expect to hear Weiwei Bai talking to the palace maid. He stood outside in silence for a long time. His heart warmed for a moment, but he coldly suppressed it. The royal family was heartless. He was just as heartless. So he pushed the door and entered. "What is my beloved concubine doing?" Weiwei Bai was a little panicked. Her first reaction was to hide the embroidered cloth to the side. She unnaturally greeted him. "Emperor, why are you here?" Sheng Xiu naturally took her hand. "Beloved concubine, didn't you want to see the lanterns? Tonight, let's go." Weiwei Bai showed a surprised smile. "Is that so?" "Thank you, Your Majesty." Sheng Xiu saw her innocent smile and his chest tightened. He knew that if he took her out tonight, there would be no turning back. Record. There. Chapter 63. Weiwei Bai didn't know anything and immediately ran to change her clothes. Sheng Xiu took her out of the door, and in front of them was the eunuch Su De who had changed his clothes. Su De very respectfully gathered his sleeves and bowed his head, saying to them, "Emperor." "No, it's master, madam, please come with me." Weiwei Bai thought that Sheng Xiu would take her to jump over the wall, fly into the sky, and fly outside. As a result, they just walked out of the palace. The road was very quiet, and when the palace door opened a small door, they went out. The people in the palace also celebrated the flower festival, But it was only the imperial kitchen that arranged a table of flower food for the women above the rank of imperial concubine, and hung lanterns in the imperial garden for them to play. Wei Wei Bai was taken out of the palace by Shang Xiyu. Along the way, the lights were very bright, there were people dancing dragons, people selling things, and lanterns were hanging all over the streets. Everyone's face was full of happy smiles. There were too many people, so Shang Xiyu could only hold Wei Wei Bai's hand so as not to get lost. Several guards in the palace followed them from a distance. There was only Suda by his side. Wei Wei Bai was like a bird that had been trapped for a long time. Seeing the lively street, the joy in her eyes couldn't be suppressed. She was wearing a civilian woman's skirt, and the light pink skirt swayed in the wind. Her face was not powdered, and her hair was tied up in a simple bun with a peach blossom hairpin inserted, but she was already so beautiful that people couldn't help but stop and look at her. Shang Xiyu coldly glanced at those who dared to look at by Wei Wei and stared back. Seeing masks hanging next to the lantern stall, he picked up a rabbit mask and put it on Wei Wei Bai. After Wei Wei Bai put on the mask, she asked softly, "Does the emperor dislike this concubine for being ugly and scaring people?" Shang Xiyu was stunned and realized Wei Wei Bai's strange aesthetic. He didn't allow her to put on those scary powders, so she had always been barefaced. For Wei Wei Bai, it was really difficult for her to show her ugly face. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 36, favorability has increased by 1. I have never seen a man who is so stingy with his favorability. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched as she silently gave the system 10,000 likes. Shang Xiyu took a tiger mask and put it on. "I am as ugly as you, so let's wear a mask together." This was a disguised form of praise that was so shameless. Shang Xiyu and Wei Wei Bai wore masks to see the lanterns. Suda silently paid the bill behind him. Most of the lanterns in the flower festival were in the shape of fresh flowers. Each of them looked like a blooming flower floating in the night sky. One would feel lost in them. Bai Weiwei suddenly saw that there was a stall selling red paper, and she immediately took Shang Xiyu to buy the paper. After buying the paper, she said to Shang Xiyu, "Write the wish on the paper, then put it on the floating water lantern. Let the paper float with the lantern to the place of the gods in the distance, then the wish can be fulfilled." Shang Xiyu felt that these little girls' ravings were somewhat unreliable, but looking at Wei Wei Bai's serious eyes, he could only accompany her nonsense. Wei Wei Bai wrote the wish and ran to the riverside. She put the floating water lantern on the water and put the paper inside. Shang Xiyu was curious for a moment. "What did you write?" Wei Wei Bai put her hands behind her back. Her eyes were full of smiles as she asked slyly, "Do you want to know? If you want to exchange my secret, there are conditions." It was the first time that Shang Xiyu saw Wei Wei Bai being so bold. It seemed that after leaving the palace, her character became lively. He asked flatly, "What do you want?" Chapter 64. In this world, what else could he not give? Wei Wei Bai suddenly looked around and found that no one was coming here. She rushed to Shang Xiyu in a few steps, reached out and took off his mask, revealing the indifferent handsome face inside. She took off her mask, stood on tiptoe, and planted a heavy kiss on his cheek. Shang Xiyu was caught off guard and suddenly took a few steps back. Wei Wei Bai had put on her mask and said with a smile, "Whose family's young master is like jade, making this concubine toss and turn, seeking him at night." The love in these words was strong and sincere. Shang Xiyu only felt that his heart was beating violently, and the cold passion after leaving the battlefield was aroused. He wanted to open his mouth to say something, but his tongue was dry, and all the words were stuck in his throat, making it sour and unbearable. Bai Weiwei turned her head to look at the floating water lantern. The wind blew, causing her clothes to flutter. Her voice was sweet and serious. "This concubine has 3 wishes in her life. First, this country will always be prosperous, barbarians will not invade, and all sides will come to congratulate. Second, your majesty will be safe and worry-free, everything will go smoothly, and live a long life." Shang Xiyu thought that Wei Wei Bai was just a silly and very simple woman. As a result, her words opened his heart. The pain in his heart was not because he couldn't protect this country. He didn't expect that she could understand him. And the wishes were for him. Sheng Xiu almost didn't dare to open his mouth and ask what her third wish was. For the first time, he felt that he might not be able to give her what she wanted. Wei Wei Bai didn't embarrass him, and still softly said, "What is this third wish? This concubine is afraid that if I ask for too much, God will not listen to this concubine, so I won't say it." Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 40. 45. Wei Wei Bai felt that this time, the increase in favorability was like a man's. Sheng Xiu was silent for a few seconds before saying, "Come here." Wei Wei Bai was puzzled, but still walked to his side. Sheng Xiu had already squatted down. "Get on my back." Wei Wei Bai was a little surprised and said awkwardly, "That's not appropriate." Sheng Xiu coldly snorted, "You were so bold just now, how come you don't think it's inappropriate? This is an imperial edict." Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Yes, Your Majesty." After Sheng Xiu carried her on his back, he exerted his strength under his feet and flew up the continuous eaves. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Was there really someone who could fly? She excitedly said to the system, I'm flying, I'm flying." The system was disdainful. "Country bumpkin." Sheng Xiu's qinggong was very good. He carried Wei Wei Bai to the highest point. Beneath their feet, the lanterns were resplendent and golden. People were coming and going, and one could see how lively and flourishing this flourishing age was. He felt the gentleness of the woman behind him, but he didn't have any evil thoughts. He was only touched. Wei Wei Bai looked at everything under her feet and couldn't help but exclaim, "So beautiful." Sheng Xiu couldn't help but show a sincere smile, and the cold expression on his face softened. It was as if Wei Wei Bai was praising him, and there was even a trace of childishness in his eyes. "This is Zhen's country. Is it as my beloved concubine wishes, a flourishing age?" The woman behind him didn't answer, but Sheng Xiu suddenly felt a gentle kiss on his head. He returned to his childhood, that difficult time with his concubine mother's company. If there is someone in this world who is willing to kiss your head and caress your hair, then this person is the most gentle person in the world to you and the person who loves you the most. T. Chapter 65. At that time, only his consort mother kissed his head and stroked his hair. But when he grew up, he returned bathed in blood and ascended the throne as an emperor, but no one treated him gently anymore. When he did well, no one praised him. When he did wrong, no one comforted him. The coldness in Sheng Xiu's eyes disappeared, and a drop of tear slowly flowed out and dripped into the darkness. Suddenly, someone set off fireworks in the distance, where the Chen family's lantern festival was. Sheng Xiu knew that this was a signal to get ready. Wei Wei Bai saw the fireworks and immediately watched them with relish. She was so big, but this was the first time she was being carried to a high place to watch the fireworks. Sheng Xiu's voice was a bit dry. "Are you tired? Let's go down." Wei Wei Bai felt that it was a pity. She wanted to see more scenery, but considering that Sheng Xiu was carrying a big living person and had to perform magical lightness kung fu, she could understand that his physical strength was not enough. Sheng Xiu flew to the place where the Chen family held the lantern festival and put Wei Wei Bai down. He looked up and saw that in the center of the lantern festival, there was a huge lotus lantern. The size and the effect of the lantern were all imperial lanterns. Sheng Xiu's eyes were cold, and the murderous intent in his heart could hardly be suppressed. He took out a small red silk flower from his arms and pinned it on Wei Wei Bai's hair bun. He also took away her mask, revealing her beautiful face. "You wait for me here, I'll go buy some food," Sheng Xiu said. Wei Wei Bai showed a trusting smile. "I'll wait for you, husband." Husband. Sheng Xiu felt that this word husband was crashing into his heart. His eyes were slightly hot, and he almost turned his head and walked away. His footsteps were fast as if he was afraid that he would regret it. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 50. The system was moved, the favorability is finally not stagnant. Wei Wei Bai looked serious. "No, how could Sheng Xiu be so kind to take me to see the lanterns? This guy's brain is not good, he's just a block of wood. How could he be so romantic? It seems that Sheng Xiu is going to do it." Just as she finished speaking, an extremely frivolous voice sounded. Yo, where did this beauty come from? Give me a kiss. This sounded like the opening statement of a cannon fodder. Wei Wei Bai snorted coldly. When she turned around, she was so scared that she almost ran back to the palace. The person in front of him had a face full of pimples, a flat nose, pea eyes, pig lips, and a body as round as a toad weighing 300 pounds. Who was this person? This was so ugly that it was beyond her imagination. Wei Wei Bai hadn't forgotten her role. She panicked. Who are you? Why are you flirting with an innocent girl in the middle of the street? Even if you look like Panan, you can't use your handsome face to flirt with others. The boar toad-like cannon fodder with pimples on their faces were shocked. He looks like Panan. He was handsome. The system was shocked. This is the first time I've seen such a clear-headed and refined host. Sheng Xiu, Su De, and a group of shadow guards who were hiding in the dark far away were also shocked. Sheng Xiu remembered Wei Wei Bai's strange illness. What was ugly was beautiful. What was beautiful was ugly. It turned out that the man she loved, the man who looked like Panan in her eyes, looked like this. In this way, he wouldn't be able to meet her standards for a lifetime. Jealousy made Sheng Xiu's face slightly distorted. The toad-like cannon fodder was excited. You are simply my confidant. I want to marry you and bring you home. I am the young master of the Chen family, Chen Pao Hui. My father is the prime minister. My family has been an official for generations. We are a scholarly family. Cannon fodder. Collect button below to record this reading record. Chapter 66. Wei Wei Bai was excited. This was the first time she was being molested by a bad person. She was scared. She immediately said with a serious face, I have a husband, please don't be so impulsive. Chen Pao Hui looked at her beautiful face, his mung bin eyes were full of lust. Your husband is already a dead man, you should be obedient and follow me. Bai Wei Wei's face was horrified. Is there still law? Chen Pao Hui grabbed her hand. Our Chen family is the law, even if I kill you, nothing will happen. Presumptuous. Wei Wei Bai slapped his ugly face, her nails deliberately used force, and fiercely scratched several marks on his face. Chen Pao Hui immediately howled, someone come, catch this woman for me. More than a dozen servants rushed over, and a few of them carried Wei Wei Bai away without any mercy. Bitch, you dare to hit me, I will not be surnamed Chen if I don't kill you. Chen Pao Hui roared angrily. Wei Wei Bai rolled her eyes. Sigh, where is Sheng Xiu? System, not far away, looking at you, you are being robbed. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath, the tears in her eyes gathered and fell down, like a pear blossom with tears. Then she cried miserably, I have a husband, my husband is the best man in the world, he told me to wait for him to come back, you let me go. System, you look like a tortured cabbage. Wei Wei Bai saw that she was being carried away, and cried even more miserably, Husband, where are you? This cry was so tragic that the Great Wall was about to collapse. Of course, the people around saw this evil act, but they didn't dare to provoke the Chen family. In the distance, Sheng Xiu was furious, his eyes were bloodshot, especially when he heard Wei Wei Bai calling him, he almost couldn't control his emotions and wanted to rush over. Su De worriedly said from the side, Your Majesty. Sheng Xiu was full of hatred as he looked in front of him. His fingers were clenched into fists as he clenched his teeth and closed his eyes. It's not time yet. We have to wait for that old man to come out so we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Just as Wei Wei Bai was taken to the largest restaurant nearby, she saw an extremely sinister middle-aged man coming over. Father. Chen Pao Hui immediately called out. Today is the day I'm hosting a banquet for all the big shots. What are you doing? Chen Cheng asked coldly. Chen Pao Hui was also afraid of his father. When he suddenly saw the small red silk flower on Wei Wei Bai's head, he immediately said excitedly, Father, this is the female slave who escaped from me. Didn't I let my female slave wear a red silk flower today? Look at her head. Wei Wei Bai realized why Sheng Xiu put a flower on her. It turned out that it was not a romantic move, but to make others think that she was an escaped slave. There were many people from the Chen family here. Even without Chen Pao Hui, there would be people from the Chen family coming to catch her if she stood there for too long. His mind was gloomy and ruthless enough. Was this Sheng Xiu? Chen Cheng coldly snorted, "Get out of here when you're caught." Chen Pao Hui happily said yes, and then let people carry Wei Bai upstairs. Wei Bai, system, do you think that if I jump off the building to protect my chastity, Sheng Xiu, that heartless person, will his favorability increase? System, jump and you'll know. Wei Bai, the system's degree of ruthlessness is the same as Sheng Xiu's. It seems that the system and Sheng Xiu, these two heartless men, can't be counted on. Chen Pao Hui's face was evil. He pushed her into the restaurant, and then stretched out his pig's foot, wanting to press this stunning beauty on the bed. // The download address is at https://www.soshu.com. Collection below to record this reading record. Chapter 67. Don't come over, I'm going to shout for help. Wei Bai pulled out the peach blossom hairpin in her hair in horror and pointed it at Chen Pao Hui. Chen Pao Hui laughed lewdly. You can shout, shout, shout until your throat breaks, no one will save you. Wei Bai, system, can't you change this outdated cannon fodder line? And, what I like most is to hear a beauty's voice in bed. Chen Pao Hui laughed and said, and was about to pounce on Wei Bai. Wei Bai immediately drilled under the table. The fat toad-like Chen Pao Hui stretched out his chubby hand to grab her, but was pricked by her hairpin. Chen Pao Hui immediately held his chubby hand and cried out in pain. Then his face turned ferocious. Come out. If you ask me to come out, I will come out. Who do you think you are? Wei Bai bent over and squatted, calmly taking out a handkerchief to wipe the blood on the hairpin. She liked this hairpin very much, but the result was that it was fed to a pig, and she didn't want to wear it in the future. Chen Pao Hui excitedly said, I am the young master of the Chen family, Chen Pao Hui. My father is the prime minister, and my family has been officials for generations. We are a scholarly family. Wei Bai, did the author only set this line for him? Even if he was a cannon fodder, he shouldn't be so brainless. Wei Bai spat, you are just a young master of the Chen family. There are so many young masters in the Chen family, who do you think you are? This old lady is the emperor's woman. Chen Pao Hui was also anxious. His brain wasn't good since he was a child. He was afraid that his brothers would chase him away. You are just the emperor's woman. The emperor has so many women, then who do you think you are? Wei Bai knocked on the system, is this guy brainless? Shouldn't the average person kneel down and tremble when they hear themselves flirting with the emperor's woman? Although the power of the imperial court was great, it did not mean that Sheng Xiu was a good person. The system said, if it's a cannon fodder, then don't be so calculative. Don't tell me you want a cannon fodder that's as handsome as the moon, handsome and tall as well as smart enough to fly into the sky and fly into the ground. Is that okay with the second male lead? Wei Bai, the system makes a lot of sense. I have nothing to say to that. Actually, we can have a few dozen more of these second male leads. Just as Wei Bai and Fat Toad were dealing with each other with ease, Sheng Xiu gradually felt the process of his heart dying as time passed. He knew that if he wanted to have a good reason for his actions, it wasn't enough for Wei Bai to simply be captured. She had to be humiliated. This kind of reason was enough for him to kill the entire Chen family and prevent the other three families from rebelling for the time being. But when he thought of Wei Bai being pressed down by another man, he wanted to kill someone, massacre the city, and destroy everything. Take action. He bit the word so hard that it almost bled. The head eunuch still wanted to dissuade him. Time is too short, as you command. He quickly bowed his head and his body trembled. He didn't dare to look at Sheng Xiu's bloodshot and angry eyes. The guards who were already prepared came out in full force. Sheng Xiu directly pulled out his sword and rushed to the restaurant with a murderous look on his face. In the restaurant, Chen Pao Hui flew into a rage out of humiliation. You think I'm ugly? I'll crush you to death. Wei Wei Bai was forced into a corner by him, but her face was cold and bored. Her mouth continued to attack. Oh, you also know that you have no human rights when you're fat and ugly. Even dogs dislike you when you go out. Your father vomits when he sees you, your mother cries when she sees you. No one loved you when you were young, and you became a pervert when you were 3. When you were 4, you stole people's underwear. When you were 5, you peeked at women bathing. When you were 6, you scared your maid to death. When you were 7, all living things within a kilometer of you were extinct. Now it's even better. When you go out, birds fly away and the world is destroyed. System, this is too cruel. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come here // fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come here. Download fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come here fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come here. Chapter 68. Chen Pao Hui felt like his heart was breaking into pieces. Every sentence hit the nail on the head. So sad. Didn't you say that I'm handsome? 2 lines of desolate tears slowly fell from Chen Pao Hui's eyes. Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked at him, then said disdainfully, you believe what others say, don't you have any self-awareness? If you're ugly, you should study more. Chen Pao Hui, will I be handsome if I study more? Wei Wei Bai, no, you spend all your time studying, you don't have to go out and scare people. Verbal attack, critical hit multiple times. The male lead is here. The system's voice sounded, and Wei Wei Bai breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, she could not look at Chen Pao Hui's ugly face. Chen Pao Hui then remembered that he was here to be molested, not to be scolded. He felt that he could not be led astray by this woman again. He tore open his collar and shouted, I'm molesting you. Wei Wei Bai straightened her expression, cleared her throat, and then screamed in despair, don't come over, I'll die in front of you. This scream was so mournful and terrifying that Chen Pao Hui was almost scared out of his wits. Wei Wei Bai screamed, don't come over, and began to desperately mess up her clean bun with her hands, making it look like a mess of weeds. She cried, don't, my husband will save me, while tearing open her coat, revealing the white underwear inside. Chen Pao Hui was stunned as he watched Wei Wei Bai become a drama queen, directing and acting herself. Damn, I haven't done anything yet. Wei Wei Bai was afraid that it was not realistic enough, so she fiercely pinched her exposed neck. Very good, it turned red, like a miserable appearance of being humiliated. Then she put the peach blossom hairpin in her hand to her neck and cried resolutely, beast, I won't let you get away with it even if I die. Chen Pao Hui, his brain is not enough to process this situation. This woman has done everything that should be done. What should he do next? But before he could do anything, the door was kicked open. Sheng Xiu, who entered the door, saw Wei Wei Bai being humiliated by an ugly fat man in the corner, and his heart broke. Let her go. Sheng Xiu coldly opened his mouth, carrying the blood-stained sword like a grim reaper, approaching step by step. Although Chen Pao Hui was stupid, as a disciple of the Chen family, he had seen the emperor before. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. Why, your majesty, I didn't do anything. He really didn't do anything. He wasn't the one who messed up her hair, tore her clothes, and took the hairpin. When Sheng Xiu saw the scene just now, how could he still be rational? The long sword in his hand slashed, and Chen Pao Hui's fat head flew out, blood gushing out from his neck. Wei Wei Bai and the system turned white at the same time, so cruel. After Sheng Xiu killed Chen Pao Hui, his mood was not relieved at all. He saw Wei Wei Bai huddled in the corner with fear. Her beautiful face was pale, her eyes were full of tears of despair, her clothes were messy, and the marks on her neck were. Sheng Xiu's eyes were red, and his voice trembled a little. It's okay, I'll save you. He took off his robe and wrapped it around her trembling body. Then he held her in his arms as if he was holding his most precious treasure. He was reluctant to crush her with a little strength. Bai Weiwei silently curled up in his arms. She didn't say anything, but her hands were firmly gripping the clothes on his chest. As if he knew her fear, Sheng Xiu choked and pretended to be calm to comfort her. Don't be afraid. After a long time, the woman in his arms cried, this concubine is not afraid, I know you will come to save me. Chapter 69. Saying that you're not afraid, this concubine and I are confused. Sheng Xiu thought of the scene just now and knew that if he came a moment later, that beast would have succeeded. He hugged her harder, his eyes were gloomy and angry. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 60. Downstairs, Wei Wei Bai looked out and saw the whole restaurant's people kneeling on the ground. Chen Cheng was kneeling in front, he didn't know that his son had been killed. His face didn't even show much fear. I didn't know that the emperor would arrive. This humble subject is disrespectful in front of the emperor and deserves to die. Sheng Xiu looked at them coldly, suddenly his expression was gloomy. You are guilty, but do you know what your good son did? Chen Cheng had already guessed it. After all, the reason for this group of murderous guards to rush in was that a Zhao Yi in the palace was missing. It was said that it was his stupid son who kidnapped her. It was said that there was a Zhao Yi in the palace who was favored overnight. She was as beautiful as a fairy. It seemed that she was the woman who was carried upstairs by his son. It was no wonder that Sheng Xiu just came in with a sword and killed the 2 servants guarding the door as soon as he opened the door. For the sake of a woman, it seemed that the emperor's brain was not very good. Chen Cheng said without fear, my son disturbed your majesty, it is my son's fault. This humble subject will strictly discipline him. Sheng Xiu sneered, discipline? Well, that beast has just gone to see the king of hell. If you want to discipline him, then go and discipline him. When Chen Cheng heard this, his courage was broken. His son was dead. Your majesty, for a mere Zhao Yi, you killed a loyal subject's child. If the late emperor knew in the underworld, he would have taught you a lesson. Sheng Xiu was holding Wei Wei Bai. He could feel that when she heard this sentence, her body was stiff and she seemed to be very scared. In his brain, the string of reason broke. At this moment, he could hardly remember his purpose. His killing intent made him violent and ferocious. You said a mere Zhao Yi, but my beloved concubine is just a Zhao Yi, it's too unfair. Starting today, by Zhao Yi will be conferred the title of imperial concubine. The position of the empress is vacant. The phoenix seal will be temporarily held by the imperial concubine, and she will decide all matters in the harem. The son of the Chen misbehaved towards the imperial concubine, beheaded. The Chen family's Zongzi committed a crime. His entire family will be executed, and his 3 generations will be exterminated. Sheng Xiu's eyes were full of anger. His expression was gloomy and cold as he slowly said the last sentence, those who offend me can be forgiven. Imperial concubine, and die without a burial place. Chen Cheng's face was deathly pale. He angrily said in horror, this is against the law. Your Majesty, you will be punished by the heavens if you destroy my family. Ked. After that, Sheng Xiu turned and left. He didn't want Bai Weiwei to see a more bloody scene. Sheng Xiu carried Weiwei Bai all the way back to the palace. Along the way, Weiwei Bai was silent. She didn't cry or make a fuss. Her eyes were empty and drifting. Sheng Xiu didn't even dare to ask her how she had been humiliated. He was guilty and timid. He didn't expect that this kind of cowardly emotion would appear in him. After returning to the palace, Weiwei Bai's first sentence was, Emperor, this concubine wants to take a bath. Sheng Xiu felt his heart hurt so much. He could only put her down and then said, you are the imperial concubine. You don't need to call yourself a concubine. / Record. There. Chapter 70. Concubines and above are called concubines. When Weiwei Bai heard this sentence, she couldn't help but laugh at herself, but there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. Then she took off the red silk flower on her head and put it on the table. This flower will be returned to the emperor. This concubine is lowly and dirty, not worthy of this flower. When Sheng Xiu heard this, His heart trembled and he couldn't help but take a step back. Wei Wei Bai finished and left. When she arrived at the bathing place, she looked haggard and indifferently said to the palace maids around her, "Leave." When the people left, the despair on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared, and she looked around furtively. "No one is here. System, no one is here, if you are not a person." Wei Wei Bai didn't bother to bicker with the system. She immediately took off her clothes, then stretched out her fingers and pinched her arms, shoulders, and chest a few times. After a while, the places on her body that should be red were red, and some of them could even see the blood from her fingernails. Red, purple, green, and green. It was miserable and miserable. Anyway, it was as miserable as it could be. The system looked at the host's work. It was really speechless. When Wei Wei Bai felt that it was almost time, she jumped into the pool naked and stretched out her hands to hug herself. She looked up and remembered the tragic Korean dramas she had watched in those years, where the vicious supporting female lead tortured the female lead to death, the female lead had leukemia, the male lead had amnesia, and so on. Her mood brewed, her face was full of despair and misery, and she cried fiercely. Her crying was suppressed, and her sobs made people feel sad and unbearable. Sheng Siyu, who was guarding outside, heard her suppressed crying and felt like his heart was being cut by a knife. He immediately rushed in and saw Wei Wei Bai with her back to him, and there were traces of being scratched. Knowing was one thing, seeing was another. He thought that for the sake of the country, he could sacrifice anything. But it was just a woman. But it was just a woman he liked. Her crying was so painful, even if she suffered this kind of humiliation, she couldn't resist. The only thing she could do was to hide and cry helplessly. For the first time, Sheng Siyu knew what it meant to feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart, and what it meant to be torn apart. He slowly reached out his hand, wanting to touch her and pull her into his embrace to protect her. But halfway through, his expression turned sad. Did he still have the right to do so? What he gave her was not protection, but harm. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have just realized that there was someone behind her. She turned around in horror and dodged to the side before she could see who it was. "Who is it? Don't come over." He was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Sheng Siyu's voice was hoarse. "It's me." When Wei Wei Bai saw who it was, she immediately wiped her tears with all her might. In the end, she couldn't wipe them clean and could only cover her face with her hands. She sobbed and said, this concubine has been disrespectful, disrespectful." Sheng Siyu knew that she was afraid. Which woman wouldn't be afraid after experiencing those things? He took off his clothes and entered the water. He reached out and slowly hugged her trembling body. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." After that, Sheng Siyu bowed his head and slowly blew a breath on the red mark on her chest. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened and she almost pushed him away. Sheng Siyu's voice was gentle. "When I was a child, every time I was hurt, my mother also blew on my wound like this, and then I didn't feel any pain. When he was a child, he was always beaten and bullied, but as long as his mother did this, he didn't feel any pain at all. Because he knew that someone loved him." T. Chapter 71. Wei Wei Bai didn't dare to move. He gently blew on the wounds. It was even more illegal than kissing. Wei Wei Bai's face turned red, it was so itchy. She sensitively curled up her toes and endured it very hard. If she laughed out loud, she would probably be pulled out by Sheng Siyu. To divert her attention, she could only look at his body. But she found that his body was full of wounds. There were whip marks, burns, knife wounds, axe wounds. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. How did he survive with so many wounds? There wasn't a single inch of skin on his body that wasn't damaged. It looked so ghastly that people couldn't look straight at it. Compared to the scratches she made herself, his was a real wound. The tears in Wei Wei Bai's eyes fell again. She reached out and slowly stroked the wounds. "Are you in pain?" Sheng Siyu's movements paused. Her gentle and sorrowful tone made his heart sweet. Obviously, what he hated most in his life was other people's sympathetic and pitiful eyes. But when he met Wei Wei Bai, He knew that there was a person in this world whose compassion could heal the scars in his heart. Shung Siyu gently said, "It doesn't hurt, it's all over." Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 65. Wei Wei Bai reluctantly pulled out a smile. "I don't hurt, so I ask the emperor not to worry. It's just that I have been humiliated, it's not suitable for me to stay in the palace anymore. I ask the emperor to give me a piece of white silk, let me kill myself to show my innocence." Shung Siyu's eyes flashed with a trace of pain. He gritted his teeth and angrily said, "I'm here, don't even think about dying." Wei Wei Bai had nothing left to live for, "Then I ask the emperor to let me shave my hair and become a nun." Shung Siyu angrily said, "Do you want me to tear down all the temples?" Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but feel wronged. "You don't allow me to do anything. You are the emperor, you are right." This little girl's mood was obviously so sad, but she was so charming. Just now, he was afraid that her temperament would change drastically after the incident. Fortunately, she was still that silly girl. Shung Siyu looked at the marks on her body. The more he looked, the more irksome it was. "If you can't forget this, then I will make you forget." After saying that, he suddenly pushed her into the water. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She was fine just now, but now she was going to drown. Fuck, can't this be fun? The next second, Shung Siyu also lowered his head into the water, sealed her trembling lips, and fiercely nibbled on them. Wei Wei Bai couldn't breathe, so she could only open her lips weakly. His tongue was like a sword, ruthlessly piercing into her mouth and tangling with hers. The moist and intense kiss and the suffocating and painful imprisonment made Wei Wei Bai fall into a strange blankness. She couldn't dodge or struggle. Shung Siyu's strong body was like an iron cage that tightly bound her, depriving her of the right to breathe. The only thing she felt was the smooth touch between their lips and teeth. When Shung Siyu took her out of the water, Wei Wei Bai felt that her whole soul had left her body. She thought that this was the limit, but when Shung Siyu pressed her whole body to the edge of the pool and began to kiss the marks on her body, she found out that she had played too much. Shung Siyu, this beast, actually intended to force himself on her. Chapter 72. Wei Wei Bai, 004, help. The system was so happy that it flew up. Keep doing it, let's see how you can do it, hey. Wei Wei Bai, adding insult to injury to this point, does she really not have any old hatred with the system? Shung Siyu kissed the marks on her body that were insulted by others. It was so heavy that it was as if he wanted to bite off a piece of her flesh. Wei Wei Bai gasped, "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Shung Siyu paused for a moment before he looked up. His eyes were full of violent and hot flames. "Jin will help you wash away the marks left by others on your body. I will make you forget any man. From today onwards, the only man you can remember is me." What a beast. He wanted to force himself on her, yet he still said it in such a dignified manner. Shung Siyu picked her up from the water. His hair had long been scattered, some curly hair hanging down, rubbing against Wei Wei Bai's snow-white skin, making her skin tremble. When he saw this picture, his eyes were dark and hungry, his long legs stretched out of the pool. Beside the pool, under the floating gauze curtain, there was a large recliner. He pressed Bai Weiwei into a chair. His exposed muscles had a kind of explosive beauty. Shadows were cast on his handsome face, and there was a kind of dissatisfaction of choosing people to devour. Wei Wei Bai shivered, it was so scary. She reached out instinctively to resist him, but her hand was tightly held. Shung Siyu's voice was dark and hoarse, "Don't be afraid, I will be gentle." Gentle? He was going to press her into a dry green bean. How was he gentle? Wei Wei Bai struggled to ask the system for help. "Can you make this guy impotent?" The system was very firm. "You can sacrifice yourself, everything is for the sake of favorability." Wei Wei Bai, for the sake of favorability, this system is so crazy to sell its host for glory. Why is there no justice to clean up such a heartless system? Shung Siyu was so close to a woman's body for the first time. Her snow-white skin was unbelievably delicate. His rough palm was full of sword calluses, and he was worried that he might cut her. Her long black hair was disheveled yet beautifully scattered on her body. The strong contrast between black and white was breathtakingly beautiful. When she raised her confused and moist eyes to look at him, he instinctively felt his back go numb, and his entire body seemed to have fallen into a violent and intense tremor. Shung Siyu hugged her and stroked her body. His nose rubbed against her sensitive neck. "You smell so good." It was fragrant like a flower, but fragile enough to tempt him into madness. This sentence was like some kind of terrible attack. Wei Wei Bai's face instantly turned pale. She suddenly turned her head and trembled in fear. She reached out and desperately patted Shung Siyu. "I don't want to, don't come over, don't come over. I'm not good at all." Shung Siyu was shocked and quickly stopped his movements. He could see that Wei Wei Bai was really scared. "Wei Wei." He tried to call her again and again. "Wei Wei, Wei Wei." Although she was very nervous just now, there was obviously no fear. Wei Wei Bai seemed to wake up. She looked at Shung Siyu in a daze. "The Emperor?" Her eyes were terrifyingly empty, and tears slowly flowed out as if she had been hit hard. "That beast also said that I taste good. I said that I'm not good. I asked him to let me go, but he kept coming over, coming over." She couldn't go on. It seemed that she was thinking of that terrifying scene. "Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here / fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here." Collection below to record the reading record of this time, Chapter 72 Emperor 26. The fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Chapter 73. When Shung Siyu heard this, his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. He suddenly felt that he was just like that beast, causing her to be so afraid of him. Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and hugged him, buried her face in his bare chest, and cried out loud. It was not the kind of heartbreaking crying just now. Instead, it was a cry of pain that came from the relief of surviving a calamity. This cry made Shung Siyu's eyes wet, and he almost lost his voice. "It's okay, I killed him, he can't touch you anymore." Wei Wei Bai couldn't care about anything else. She hugged Shung Siyu's wet body and cried until the sky fell and the earth cracked. In the end, she was tired from crying, and unexpectedly fell asleep on his body with tears on her face. Shung Siyu's heart was completely softened by Wei Wei Bai's crying, and he kept stroking her back to comfort her. But there was no evil thought. It was just pure comfort. When she fell asleep, he saw her face full of tears, but he didn't think it was indecent or ugly, and personally wiped her face and body clean. Then he put on clothes for her, wrapped her up tightly, and carried her back to the bed. All the servants in the hall were driven out, for fear of disturbing Wei Wei Bai. The head eunuch stayed on the side and watched his emperor tenderly cover Wei Wei Bai with a quilt, and then he personally stayed by the bed and watched. The head eunuch just glanced at it, and didn't dare to look up again. When someone outside the hall came to report, the head eunuch bowed and told Shung Siyu. When Shung Siyu heard this, the gentleness in his eyes disappeared, leaving only a gloomy killing intent. "It seems that the rest of the bastards can't stay, I'll go and see." The Chen family was exterminated. How could the rest of the people not even let out a fart? Shung Siyu just got up, but he was reluctant to walk a few laps around the bed. He didn't dare to kiss the sleeping Wei Wei Bai's face before he was willing to go out with the head eunuch. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 70. System, this mysterious increase in favorability, this host is truly a heaven-defying one. Was the world moving too fast, or was it getting old? Wei Wei Bai waited until Shung Siyu left before she opened her eyes. She lamented, "It's only 70. I cried until I lost my integrity. Hee hee. Wei Wei Bai, but I didn't need to sell my body to gain so many favorability points. Hey, I'm really too beautiful. People can't help but love me." The system suddenly said, "You taste so good." Wei Wei Bai had a narcissistic look on her face. "Of course. Even the beauty tastes good." The system said, "It's as good as braised pork trotters." Wei Wei Bai, by the way, this plane doesn't seem to have any side quests. Wei Wei Bai sighed. The system fell silent. Wei Wei Bai also fell silent. Then, the system said timidly, "I think so." Wei Wei Bai's face turned ferocious. Don't tell me you were pregnant from the beginning. Did you forget to tell me? The system said, well, there's no difference between telling you now and telling you at the beginning. I was trying my best to help you complete the mission, so I was too busy and missed this little side quest. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and said, what side quest? The system immediately said, let Shang Xiu successfully destroy the 4 great clans, and then create a new dynasty. What a big little side quest. The system said, actually, the side quest doesn't have to be completed. Wei Wei Bai angrily replied, complete, it must be completed. How can the side quest not be completed? Even if I have to sell my life, I have to complete it. System, damn, the host has a good work attitude. I'm a bit moved. Download the at https://m-soshu.com quick. Chapter 74. System, damn, the host has a good work attitude, I'm a bit moved. Bai Wei Wei was excited, a side task can be exchanged for a stunning appearance, then my next side task's reward might be eternal youth. I want to kill the 4 great families and send Shang Xiu to the position of a wise emperor. The touched system was silent for a while, and finally couldn't help it, Wei Wei Bai pretended to be weak and stayed in bed for 2 days. Shang Xiu, that beast, really didn't dare to make a move on her. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she always felt that Shang Xiu was a virgin chicken who had just eaten a little meat, and the way he looked at her was similar to looking at a bowl of braised pork. However, Shang Xiu was also busy, because the Chen family was slaughtered, but there was no explanation. She heard that when he went to court, there were already officials who were killed in the main hall. Incapable emperor, indiscriminately killing innocent people. For a mere demon concubine, he was muddle-headed. He must hand over the demon concubine and cut her into pieces, and give the Chen family the innocence of 100 people. She heard that since this morning, the remaining officials of the 3 great families have been kneeling outside the palace, saying that if this matter is not dealt with, they will kneel there until they die. Shang Xiu now had only 3 choices. One was to hand her over and say that it was all because of this evil concubine that bewitched the emperor. This would give the Chen family, who had been exterminated, a reputation, and give them the title of a loyal family or something. Then, they would give some power to the other 3 great families, and this matter would be resolved. The second was to not admit it, and then one by one, clean up the remaining 3 great families in the name of spoiling the demon concubine, and kill until the blood flowed like a river. The court would definitely be turbulent, and at that time, Shang Xiu would hypocritically say that he was guilty of spoiling a poisonous woman, killing so many loyal officials and so on. Then he would pull her to the market, and catch her. No, catch her was not enough, it would take more than 3,600 cuts to vent his anger. Wait for others to vent their anger, then he could be a wise emperor again. The second was definitely the road Shang Xiu took. Wei Wei Bai felt that Shang Xiu could not change this route, after all, he was not really an incapable emperor. And the third one, was that Shang Xiu was reluctant to kill her, and then people used the excuse of eradicating the incapable ruler as an excuse to rebel. When the time comes, the people everywhere will not be able to make a living. Even if Shang Xiu can keep the throne, his vitality will be greatly damaged. Maybe the foreign tribes will attack and cause the country to perish. Even if Shang Xiu had a hole in his brain, he couldn't do this. Shang Xiu hurried to deal with those chores. Wei Wei Bai had already moved into his residence, and all the palace maids and eunuchs were basically gathered around her. She looked up and saw someone pouring tea for her. When his back was sore, Hong Xiu and Lu Lei would give him a gentle massage with their little fists. This was an evil feudal society. Wei Wei Bai sighed as she enjoyed the considerate service of others. And when Consort Chen led the palace maids and bodyguards over, what they saw was Wei Wei Bai lying on the chaise lounge without any manners. Beside her, there was a palace maid feeding her grapes. Consort Chen's eyes turned red, and murderously said to the bodyguards she brought, "Tie this bitch up and beat her to death." Wei Wei Bai's face did not change, but her momentum was fierce. "Who dares to touch me?" The palace maids and eunuchs, who dared to touch her? Consort Chen had a lot of power and had been in the palace for a long time. She shouted, beat this bitch to death, and you will be rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold and 3 levels of promotion. I guarantee you a life of prosperity. Wei Wei Bai said, I'm tempted, can I beat myself to death? System, I'm tempted too, can I beat you to death? To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click save. Chapter 75. The guards brought by the imperial consort were soon moved. After all, the imperial consort was very powerful, and everyone knew that she could not fall. Even if Wei Wei Bai was a new favorite, without a good background, she would soon be abandoned by the emperor. Several guards looked at each other and immediately nodded. Then they rushed over, intending to take down Wei Wei Bai first. However, the palace maids and eunuchs around Wei Wei Bai huddled together to protect the lady. What a joke! Sheng Xiu almost held Wei Wei Bai in the palm of his hand. If something happened to the lady, their heads would fall off. The imperial consort was so angry that she couldn't even speak. She pointed her finger at the palace maids and eunuchs. Well, I will let my father kill all of you disloyal and unjust people. Who are you saying is disloyal? Who is disloyal? After Wei Wei Bai swallowed the last grape in her mouth, she finally had time to speak. She lazily reached out and let Hong Xiu help her up. This style, this action, laziness with nobility and elegance, made people feel that it was very pleasing to the eye. The imperial consort's face was as calm as water. You slut, you instigated the emperor to kill a loyal minister by mistake, killing more than 100 innocent people in the Chen family. Heinous crimes are not enough to describe you. Witch. Today, I am here to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, to let the emperor see clearly the vicious face of you witch. These people who protect you are disloyal and unjust people, they should be killed. Wei Wei Bai showed a frightened expression. Oh, I'm so scared. The imperial consort was about to show a disdainful smile. Wei Wei Bai's expression returned to indifference in the next second. I lied to you, old woman. Old woman? Old woman. The imperial consort was 3 years older than Sheng Xiu. If it weren't for her family background, she wouldn't be able to enter the palace. Wei Wei Bai was only 18 years old in this world, so she must be at the tender age of a flower. The imperial consort was most afraid of people talking about her age. She was so angry that her body trembled. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched her face. What do you mean by disloyal and unjust? It's just that you're old and you're jealous of my youth and beauty. However, my beauty can indeed arouse the jealousy of thousands of women, so I don't blame you. After all, it's human nature. The imperial consort was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. You say I'm jealous of you? You only have good looks, what else do you have? Wei Wei Bai, is there anything more beautiful than that in this world? Consort Chen angrily said, none of you dare to make a move. This consort will personally beat her to death. The emperor will definitely understand my painstaking efforts. With that, Consort Chen snatched the stick from the guard's hand and rushed towards Wei Wei Bai. Who would dare to stop Consort Chen from taking action? After all, she was also the emperor's woman. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Why would a woman want to make things difficult for another woman? Then she rushed forward and avoided Consort Chen's soft stick attack. She directly reached out and grabbed Consort Chen's hair. Then she reached out and stabbed Consort Chen's eyes with her other hand. When Consort Chen screamed, Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to lift her foot and heavily kicked between her legs. Consort Chen opened her mouth and cried out, then went limp. Wei Wei Bai's series of actions was a woman's anti-wolf technique. Stabbing eyes and flirting were a piece of cake. In the past, her body was weak, so she couldn't learn Muay Thai or Sonda. She could only learn some anti-wolf techniques. It was more than enough to deal with a pampered woman like Consort Chen. In a few moves, Consort Chen cleaned up. Wei Wei Bai coldly turned around. Next. Everyone took 3 steps back in unison. The guards all tightened their legs. The eunuch's already cold lower body became even colder. Chapter 76. That kick just now was too ruthless. If a woman could be kicked down, then a man could probably ascend to heaven. Wei Wei Bai raised her hand and called Hong Xiu over to help her. A person should be elegant, their movements should be slow, and the bigger the better. Hong Xiu immediately obediently came over to support her hand. Then Wei Wei Bai looked down and coldly said to the imperial consort, "As a woman, you should be more elegant. What does it look like to fight and kill all day? You said that I am not loyal and righteous, and that I am framing loyal people. I think that your breasts have grown into your brain, and you are stupid without knowing. System, your breasts have grown into your brain? Didn't you say that the imperial consort's brain was blocked and flat-chested?" The imperial consort covered her eyes as she angrily glared at her with red eyes. The palace maid beside her helped her up, but she slapped the palace maid away. Then she turned around. "What do you know? Do you know what I have done for the emperor?" Wei Wei Bai's face became cold. When she was serious, she always had a kind of inviolable aura. "What did you do?" The Su, Liang, Wu, and Chen families, these 4 families are just poisonous insects entrenched in the dynasty. Wei Wei Bai coldly smiled. With a wave of her sleeve, she looked at the imperial consort like she was looking at an ant. In this world, the surname is Shang, not Su, Liang, Wu, or Chen. The dynasty has been controlled by you 4 families for many years. You have done many heartless things behind the back of the court, causing many places to be filled with resentment. What is the Chen family? They are just evil tigers that eat the wealth of the people and oppress the common people. The Chen family was destroyed because of me, but I have a clear conscience. They deserve to die and should be killed. Wei Wei Bai said word by word, "In my heart, the Su family should be killed, the Wu family should be killed, and the Liang and Chen families should be killed even more. If the emperor doesn't kill them, then I will. I am not loyal and righteous. The ones who are not loyal and righteous are you people who occupy the court and look down on the imperial family." The light in Wei Wei Bai's eyes was so sharp that it could cut people's hearts. "What did you do? Everything you have was given to you by the emperor. What qualifications do you have to talk about giving?" At this moment, Wei Wei Bai was standing against the light, but she was still dazzling. She slowly said the last sentence, "I want him to raise his butcher's knife and kill all the poisonous insects and hungry tigers in front of him. I also hope that one day, he will hold power in his hands and rule over the world. I am even more willing to use my bones, flesh, and blood to pave the way for him, so that he can walk towards a place where all people will revere him and create a prosperous dynasty." Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 75. Wei Wei Bai was not moved. She turned around slowly and looked at the painting on the wall. The mountains and rivers were unbroken, and the hungry tiger was entrenched. She seemed to be talking to herself, and her tone became gentle. "How is this a sacrifice? Everything that belongs to me doesn't belong to me anymore. What can I give?" Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 80. Imperial consort Chen was flustered and exasperated. Deceiving the public with lies, full of nonsense. Men, beat her to death for me." The entire room suddenly fell silent. In the silence, a steady footstep became clearer and clearer. Imperial consort Chen's body trembled, and she suddenly had a bad premonition. At this time, a familiar and dark voice came from behind her. "Oh, who did you say you want to beat to death?" Imperial consort Chen suddenly turned around and saw Sheng Xiu standing at the door with one hand behind his back, looking at her with cold eyes. That gaze was no different from looking at a dead person. Imperial consort Chen's heart sank. Didn't her father bring all the ministers to stop him? How could he come here? Sheng Xiu walked past her and went straight to Wei Wei Bai. Button. Chapter 77. Wei Wei Bai still had her back to them and did not turn around, as if she was enduring something. Sheng Xiu stared at her. Today, she gave him too many surprises, too many scares. He thought she was silly, but smart enough to know his situation. He thought she was gentle and harmless, but she could beat the Chen Fei down. He thought she never hurt people with her words, but her words were like a sharp blade, killing everyone. He thought she was simply infatuated with him, even if it was not for power, she would not really love him. But he found that her feelings for him were as heavy as the country. There were so many different places, and he had never discovered such a character. He seemed to really know the woman in front of him for the first time. Clearly, his reason told him that she was hiding too much from him, and he must be cautious. But he clearly knew that his heart was shocked when he heard that she was willing to use everything to pave the way for him. His eyes were wet. In this world, there had never been a person who could value him to this extent. And there would never be a person who sacrificed everything just to hold him to the peak. What did he have to deserve to meet her? Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 85. The Chen Fei saw that Sheng Xiu did not even look at her, and the bad premonition in her heart became more clear. She was just about to open her mouth to refute, "Emperor, this concubine." Sheng Xiu had not thought of her, but when he heard her voice, anger rose from his heart. He reached out to pick up the teacup next to him and threw it at her. "Originally, I thought of your family's past merits and thought highly of you, but I didn't expect that the one I favored was an ugly and poisonous woman like you." Guards, this Chen Fei led people to force the emperor to abdicate. You will be stripped of your concubine position, reduced to a commoner, and locked in the prison. When the guards next to him heard this, they immediately rushed forward and violently removed the headdress on the Chen Fei's head. Then, they pulled her away with her disheveled hair. The Chen Fei's heart was torn apart, and she struggled with all her might. "Emperor, if you favor this slut, can you ignore this concubine's sincerity for you? For you, I fought against my family and helped you fight for power and profit. I would rather defy my father and help you. I love you." Sheng Xiu turned back and finally looked at her. His face was full of ridicule. "Love me? The one you love is your empress, right? It was said that your father saw that you were still unable to give birth to a child, so he planned to steal the day and get a man to implant his seed so that you could successfully conceive a child. That way, you'll be able to sit firmly in the back seat, right?" The imperial concubine trembled all over, her eyes filled with fear. How did he know about these things? Sheng Xiu frowned and coldly said, still not pulling it down, "It's dirtying my eyes." Chen Fei's face was covered in tears. "Your Majesty, this concubine didn't do that, you can't treat me like this." The voice gradually faded away. The once insufferably arrogant imperial consort was deprived of everything by Sheng Xiu and locked up in prison. Wei Wei Bai still didn't turn around, but her body trembled even more violently. Sheng Xiu thought that she was afraid of his ruthless means, but when he walked in front of her, he found that her eyes were filled with stubborn tears that refused to fall, and there was no trace of blood on her pale face. This kind of expression seemed to be fear, but it was more like she was stubbornly holding on, not daring to let people find out that she was afraid. "Wei Wei." Sheng Xiu was speechless for a while. He didn't know why she had such an expression. Did he really scare her? Wei Wei Bai seemed to have finally seen her savior. Suddenly, she plunged into Sheng Xiu's arms and sobbed, "Why did you come so late? Just now, someone was shouting to kill me. I was so scared." Sheng Xiu, system. Just now, she beat that person to the ground. Was it because she was scared? Collect below to record the reading record of this time. Chapter 77 Emperor 31. The Chapter 78. Wei Wei Bai grabbed Sheng Xiu's clothes and wiped her tears while accusing the imperial concubine of all kinds of evil deeds. "You didn't see the imperial concubine holding a stick and shouting to kill me. She led a group of people and said that if they killed me, they would be able to live a life of glory and wealth. I was so moved. No, I was so scared." Sheng Xiu, Wei Wei Bai continued to complain miserably, and she scolded me for being unfaithful and unfilial, saying that I am a witch and a witch. Even if I am ugly, she can't insult me. I am so sad. Sheng Xiu, Wei Wei Bai cried, "Emperor, fortunately you came, otherwise you wouldn't have seen me. My arms and legs are small. If the imperial concubine hit me with a stick, wouldn't I die?" Sheng Xiu, "Just now, it was you who kicked me until I was almost paralyzed." The system awkwardly called the host. Hey, you calm down." Wei Wei Bai didn't have time to pay attention to this waste system. She continued to act like a little wife who was being abused. "Emperor, my heart is still beating." System, hey, drama queen. "Oh, no, host, if your heart doesn't beat, you will die." Fuck, That's not the point. Just now, the male lead was standing outside, so I reminded you. Wei Wei Bai acted so high that she didn't respond to the system's words for a while. She continued to act pitiful in an attempt to capture more favorability. Didn't they say that men like delicate little white lotuses the most? She was now blooming brightly. Emperor, woo-woo. Wei Wei Bai suddenly woke up in the middle of her sobbing. Wei Wei Bai, waste system, what did you just say? System, Sheng Siyu has been standing outside. I reminded you that the male lead was coming, and when the favorability rose, I also reminded you. You didn't hear it, right? Wei Wei Bai, she really didn't hear it. Just now, she was busy cleaning up the imperial concubine. When she got high, she didn't care about anything else. And since the imperial concubine dared to yell at her like that, Sheng Siyu must have been hindered, it was impossible for him to appear. So she was particularly free, particularly simple and rough. Wei Wei Bai, system, when I was bullying the imperial concubine, I didn't look like a vicious female supporting female, right? System, female male lead is female's male lead, female lead is male leads female leads, ruthless, and Bai Wei Wei was silent for a long time before she timidly looked up and saw Sheng Siyu looking at her with a strange expression. Sheng Siyu stared at her for a while before he said, "You're not crying?" Sheng Mu, Sheng, Zhu, female lead, Muses, SSS, SS. Sheng Siyu found that every time she was nervous, she would pinch her sleeves. Wei Wei Bai's voice weakened. Your Majesty, were you actually outside the whole time? Sheng Siyu hesitated to tell the truth. He was indeed outside the whole time. But Wei Wei Bai obviously wanted to pretend to be weak and win sympathy from him. He obviously hated this kind of lying woman the most. But he didn't know why. Looking at Wei Wei Bai, he couldn't hate her at all. Instead, he felt that her acting was particularly cute. Wei Wei Bai's face was full of despair. Sheng Siyu's expression showed that he had been outside the whole time. Her delicate white lotus persona collapsed. His favorability wouldn't drop to -100, right? She felt that she could hold the system and die together. Full text //. Download. Save at the bottom to record the reading record. Chapter 79. Sheng Siyu suddenly snorted and couldn't help but laugh. He also couldn't help it. She was simply baring her fangs and brandishing her claws in front of the imperial consort. As a result, when she came here, she began to cry and complain about other people. This kind of her, he thought she was cute, he was simply hopeless. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 87, favorability increased by 2. The system and Wei Wei Bai, this can also increase favorability. Sheng Siyu bowed his head, his forehead against hers, looking into her clean and clear eyes. How many more surprises can you give me? Wei Wei Bai. These words were gentle and affectionate, without a trace of indifference. Wei Wei Bai looked at him, suddenly raised her head and kissed his lips. It was easy to be surprised. Did her kiss count? Sheng Siyu was stunned, his breathing stopped, then he reached out and clasped her head, kissing her back. This kiss didn't have any lust, nor was it intense, it was just gentle intertwining. The sun came in and stretched their shadows together, it was beautiful and lingering. The imperial consort was solved, but the ministers outside the palace were not solved. It was said that because the Chen family was destroyed, there was a lot of noise outside, and people were in a panic. And by Wei Wei's reputation as a Yarrow concubine, who knows how it spread, but it spread further and further. Sheng Siyu knew that he had reached the most critical moment. To solve the remaining enemies, he must be ruthless and merciless, he couldn't leave them a trace of possibility of escape. The imperial consort was locked up because of Wei Wei Bai. The Su family would probably come directly to the palace to ask for an explanation. At that time, he could directly clean up the Su family. Once the Su family died, the remaining 2 families would be easy. But if this goes on, Wei Wei Bai couldn't be saved. Sheng Siyu's face was gloomy, his anxious mood had been tormenting him. Suda, if I don't go down, Suda knelt down, his old tears flowing down. During this time, He had seen the relationship between the emperor and Master Bai. But which was more important between love and the country? Your Majesty, we need you to protect this country. Even if you want to protect the imperial consort, the country is in chaos. You can protect her for a while, but you can't protect her forever. Shang Xiu knew that at this point, if he took a step back, he might be forced to become a puppet emperor. If they were to fight directly, the foreign races would be eyeing them covetously. He couldn't allow his vitality to be greatly damaged, but he couldn't take even half a step back. Could it be that sacrificing Bai Weiwei was the only way? When Shang Xiu returned, he saw Weiwei Bai standing at the door with a palace maid holding a lantern next to her. She was wearing a light purple dress. Under the moonlight, she looked like a fairy. Shang Xiu's heart couldn't help but beat faster. He walked over and said in a gentle tone, "Why don't you wear more? It's cold outside." Weiwei Bai smiled. "This concubine heard that today is your Majesty's birthday, so this concubine made you longevity noodles and ordered them to send wine to celebrate your Majesty's birthday." Birthday? How long had it been since he celebrated his birthday? It seemed that no one remembered his birthday at all. Shang Xiu's heart warmed up, and he led her in. He saw a table full of dishes and warm wine, and the most conspicuous thing was a bowl of longevity noodles in front of him. "Did you make it?" Shang Xiu said emotionally. Weiwei Bai nodded. "I threw the noodles into the pot, and then the imperial chef helped me pick it up." Shang Xiu, it was estimated that the imperial chef did the kneading and kneading of the dough to make the noodles. Even the subsequent cooking of the noodles was done by the imperial chef. Shang Xiu sat down, picked up the chopsticks and ate the noodles. After taking a bite, he saw Weiwei Bai's face full of expectation. He could only praise against his conscience, "The noodles you make are delicious." Is at https://www.soshu.com collection below to record the reading record of this time, Chapter 79 Emperor 33. The Chapter 80. Weiwei Bai felt that this sentence was the second best sentence she had ever heard. "What was the first sentence you said?" "Of course, it was the sentence you only have beauty, what else do you have?" After Shang Xiu finished eating the noodles, he poured the wine. He was upset and eager to vent his anxiety that could not be solved. Weiwei Bai saw him drinking eagerly and reached out to stop him. "You can't drink wine like this, Emperor." Shang Xiu's action paused. He looked up and saw the woman in front of him was beautiful under the light, smiling. Weiwei Bai had bowed her head and held the cup in his hand. Shang Xiu's heart moved. His hand followed her movements and poured the wine in the cup into her mouth. Her bright red lips moved slightly, and the wine in her mouth was swallowed. Shang Xiu felt that the blood in his whole body was boiling. How could she be so seductive? Weiwei Bai poured another cup of wine and handed it to Shang Xiu. She also poured a cup for herself, and then hooked her arm around his. "Let's drink a cup of wine." Drinking a cup of wine was a custom for newlyweds to exchange wine and drink with each other. His voice became hoarse. "Do you know what this means?" Drinking a cup of wine also had another meaning, which was marriage. Weiwei Bai didn't think so much, she just felt that Shang Xiu couldn't be so decadent. Now the two of them were grasshoppers on the same rope. If Shang Xiu fell, she estimated that she wouldn't be able to get enough favorability and would be hacked to death. Shang Xiu saw her expression and knew that she didn't think so deeply. Maybe she just wanted to make him happy. He used his hand and drank a cup of wine with her, but his eyes were stubbornly looking at her. Weiwei Bai actually didn't drink much. After drinking the wine, she began to get drunk. She was unprepared and was coaxed by Shang Xiu to drink several cups of wine. When her consciousness began to become confused, she said to the system vigilantly, "If I say anything that will cause favorability to drop, remember to remind me." The system said, "Go ahead, I'll remind you." Weiwei Bai was relieved. She tried hard to see Shang Xiu's appearance but finally gave up helplessly. What kind of person was Shang Xiu? He could see that she couldn't hold her liquor. She staggered to her feet and gave him a lovely smile. "Your Majesty, why are you still moving?" Shang Xiu sat and looked at her helplessly. "I didn't move." Weiwei Bai pursed her lips and grabbed him domineeringly. I said not to move, so you're not allowed to move. Shang Xiyu had always known that her character was more lively, but the environment in the palace was particularly depressing, which caused her character to be very nervous at the beginning. After getting drunk, she seemed to have regained her pure and extroverted personality. Shang Xiyu said softly, "Your character is actually not suitable for entering the palace. I don't know who sent you in." Wei Wei Bai sat on Shang Xiyu's lap and reached out to hold his face. She said drunkenly, "Who sent me here? I came by myself." "Of course, it's for you." What Chunxia, the emperor, Wei Wei Bai couldn't remember. She only remembered the favorability. Shang Xiyu stiffened. "For me?" Wei Wei Bai raised her hand and carefully traced his face. "I still remember, our family lived in a place very far from here. It was plundered by foreigners for many years. Once, I was robbed when I went out. I thought I was dead, but a young general wearing armor and riding a black horse appeared and saved me." Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text. Collection below to record the reading record. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.